When the disciple asked, Su Zimo replied, "Since we're here to destroy a country, of course we start by calling them out. If someone's going to die, we should at least let them die understanding why." The disciple froze. Just the few of them? Aside from Su Zimo, the ancestor, the rest, disciples, sect master Wang Hengji, the elders were, frankly, nothing more than a ragtag group. For them to go challenge the mighty ancient dragon god empire? That was suicide. Madness. As for the people from the sage heaven god empire, they hadn't said a word the entire journey. They were simply watching like spectators at a comedy. Who openly calls out a nation like this? Even if you wanted war with the ancient dragon god empire, you'd prepare, look for advantages, catch them off guard. Who does it the way Su Zimo does? No preparation, just walking up and declaring you're here to destroy a nation. Of course, they couldn't understand Su Zimo's mindset. When two people fight, you think about strategy, what's advantageous, where to strike. But when a person steps on an ant, why think at all? One stomp and it's dead. In Su Zimo's eyes, the ancient dragon god empire was the same, nothing but ants. And they were only an appetizer, not his true goal, nor the goal of the true martial sacred ground. "What are you standing there for?" Su Zimo asked the disciple. "Ancestor, I don't dare," the disciple said, lowering his head in shame. He truly didn't dare challenge the ancient dragon god empire. This was the ingrained inferiority that had existed ever since the sect fell. "You go," Su Zimo said, looking at Xiao Anin. Xiao Anin didn't hesitate. She stepped into the air and flew toward the direction of the dragon ships. She drew the true martial sword. Ever since receiving the blade, she had cherished it deeply. The journey had tempered both her and her connection with the weapon. She found that the blade felt as if it were tailor-made for her, natural, effortless. By now she could wield it fluently. "Where is the general of Dragon City?" Xiao Anin's crisp voice echoed across the sky. No one answered. On the city walls, the guards were sluggish and bored. The city itself was bustling, and no one cared about her shouting. They assumed it was someone messing around. Xiao Anin wasn't irritated. She called out 3 more times. "Where is the general of Dragon City? Where is the general of Dragon City? Where is the general of Dragon City?" Each shout was louder than the last. Her aura surged upward, as if it could pierce the heavens. The echo lingered across the sky. Finally, someone responded. "Who's making all this noise?" An imperial meridian figure rose into the air, facing her from afar. He frowned. "What the hell do you want?" "Go report to your ancient dragon god empire's emperor," Xiao Anin said. "Because your ocean dragon prince targeted our true martial sacred ground repeatedly, and because your red dragon army attacked our sect, we are here today to destroy your nation." Her tone was direct, her blade intent sharp and forceful. She looked like a skyborn valkyrie. The general snorted. "The true martial sacred ground? Isn't that the fallen trash sect? Little girl, destroy a nation? Uncle has no interest in your jokes." Xiao Anin didn't waste breath. She raised the true martial sword and slashed. A thunderous boom erupted. The general's face tightened. He crossed both arms before his head. The blade intent exploded, sending him flying backward. He steadied himself in midair and looked at his armored wrist guards. The single strike had cracked them. His expression grew ugly. "Little girl, I was ignoring your age earlier and didn't want to lower myself, but it seems you're seeking death." He stretched out his hand. "Spear, come." His silver dragon spear, originally placed atop the city wall, erupted with gun intent and shot to his hand like a white dragon. He thrust forward in a tight, storm-like assault. Xiao Anin met him head-on, fearless. Booms echoed as the two figures collided again and again. Below, the Grand Elder looked worried. Will Anin be all right? After all, she was his granddaughter. Su Zimo said, "If she can't beat an Imperial Meridian while she's already at the God Meridian realm, that would be the real embarrassment." The elder thought about it and nodded. True enough. When he looked up again, the general had already lost the advantage. Xiao Anin's relentless attacks were suffocating him. When did the true martial sacred ground gain someone like this? He wondered in disbelief. His distraction cost him. Xiaonin's kick slammed into his abdomen, and the true martial sword released a burst of killing intent as she struck again. The panicked general hurriedly raised his spear to block. A crisp crack sounded. The silver dragon spear shattered under the blade. With another heavy boom, Xiaonin swept her leg, sending him flying. Half the city wall collapsed from the impact. She stepped forward, standing before Dragon City, her foot on the blood-soaked general. She looked at the terrified soldiers and said, "Tell your emperor this. The true martial sacred ground has come to destroy your nation." "Why, yes, I'll go right now." The soldier didn't dare hesitate. He scrambled away as fast as he could. "Young master, how is that?" Xiaonin turned and asked Su Zimo. "Was my challenge good enough?" "Still a bit lacking, but miles better than the others," Su Zimo said with a smile. Inside Dragon City, many people had seen the scene, but the residents didn't realize disaster was coming. Instead, they discussed it with interest. On a main street outside a tea house, 5 people were drinking tea. 4 were young, 2 men and 2 women. The last was an old man, hair and beard white, his aura deep and powerful, clearly a formidable figure. They had been quietly drinking until passers-by broke the peace. "Hurry to the city gates and look. Someone says they're here to destroy our ancient dragon god empire." "Quit joking. Besides the 10 god clans, who could possibly destroy us? The 10 god clans are definitely not people we can afford to offend. Maybe some of the ancient kingdoms have banded together and are trying to stir up conflict with our ancient dragon god empire," someone speculated. "You're guessing all wrong. If I tell you who came to destroy the nation, you'll be shocked," another said with a grin. "Who is it?" People around them were intrigued. If it wasn't another ancient nation nor the 10 god clans, then who had such strength? "It's the true martial sacred ground," someone laughed. "Hurry, let's go look. I heard they're right at the city gate." One of the gate soldiers already went to report to the emperor. "True martial sacred ground. That name sounds familiar," someone muttered. "Of course it does. They were glorious in the past. Now though, well, you know." The chatter outside the tea house grew louder, then quickly faded as people rushed off. Inside, the 5 who had been drinking tea were now curious. The young man who knew the details, named Zhao Danyang, stood up excitedly. "There's a fight outside? Let's go watch." "Danyang," the young woman beside him said, "don't forget our mission. No unnecessary complications." "Sister Qing, I'm not causing trouble. I just want to watch," Zhao Danyang pleaded, looking at Zhao Qing. He was the restless type, unable to sit still. Making him sit quietly and drink tea was torture. Letting him go watch some commotion was probably safer. Zhao Qing sighed helplessly and looked toward the elderly man seated at the head of the table. "Second grandfather," she called out, but the old man didn't respond. He was deep in thought. Zhao Danyang grinned mischievously, put a finger to his lips telling Zhao Qing to stay quiet, then snuck up behind the old man. He leaned toward his ear and shouted, "Second grandfather, Sister Qing is calling you." The old man jolted in shock, his beard practically lifting from the blast of sound. "Danyang, are you trying to send me to the next life on the spot? What's with that shouting?" "I'm not deaf," he scolded. Zhao Danyang chuckled. "Second grandfather, what were you thinking about? The true martial sacred ground, is that the sect of the true martial saint sovereign?" Zhao Zhoutian asked. "It should be. In the absolute God heaven, is there a second true martial sacred ground?" Zhao Qing replied. "The true martial saint sovereign." Zhao Zhoutian narrowed his eyes with emotion. His name once shook the 9 heavens. A pity. So many years have passed since anyone has mentioned him. Second grandfather, was the true martial saint sovereign really that strong? Zhao Danyang asked curiously. He had heard the name, but he hadn't lived in that era. When the true martial sacred ground stood on equal footing with the 10 god clans, he hadn't yet been born. By the time he grew up, the sect had long declined. Zhao Zhoutian smiled. Strong? More than strong. If we listed all the great figures of the absolute God Heaven from ancient times to now, the true martial Saint Sovereign would absolutely have a place on that list. How does he compare to our clan's ancestors? Zhao Danyang asked. That depends on which ancestor you're comparing him to, Zhao Zhoutian said with a laugh. What about Ancestor Morning Star? Zhao Danyang asked. He's nothing next to the true martial Saint Sovereign, Zhao Zhoutian replied. That doesn't sound very impressive then, Zhao Danyang muttered. I'm saying our Ancestor Morning Star is nothing next to him, Zhao Zhoutian corrected with a sighing laugh. What about Ancestor Moving Mountains? An ant. Then the violent holy progenitor? Zhao Danyang still didn't want to give up. The violent saint. Zhao Zhoutian drank a sip of tea and spoke slowly. The violent holy progenitor was strong, very strong, but still a bit inferior. If they were both saint sovereigns, why can't he compare? Zhao Danyang complained. Even among saint sovereigns there are levels. When the true martial saint sovereign traveled, 100 saints gave way, and the gods themselves retreated, Zhao Zhoutian said. Zhao Danyang still wasn't satisfied. Then what about our clan's progenitor? Surely he can surpass him. Do not speak the progenitor's name so casually, Zhao Zhoutian reprimanded sharply. His tone made Zhao Danyang shrink back immediately. Normally, Zhao Zhoutian was gentle, never angry, but when he truly scolded someone, no one dared talk back. Zhao Zhoutian continued. The greatness of our progenitor resonates throughout the absolute God Heaven. To the Zhao God clan, the progenitor is the origin of everything. Zhao Danyang lowered his head, not daring to speak further. Zhao Zhoutian stood. Let's go take a look. Second grandfather wants to watch the fight? Then who are we helping? Zhao Danyang asked eagerly. I want to see what the true martial sacred ground has become. By all logic, they should be ruined. How could they have the strength to destroy the ancient dragon god empire? Unless, Zhao Zhoutian paused. Unless what? Zhao Qing asked. That's enough. Let's go see first. We're helping no one, Zhao Zhoutian said, waving his hand. The group followed the crowd toward the city gates. Meanwhile, in the ancient dragon god empire's imperial palace, the atmosphere was grand and imposing. Dragon sculptures decorated everything, fitting the empire's name. Within the morning court hall, Paragon Dragon Sovereign sat upon the dragon throne, with civil officials on one side and military officers on the other. The air was tense and severe. The gate soldier knelt before the court, reporting the true martial sacred grounds challenge. You're saying the true martial sacred ground has come to destroy the nation? Paragon Dragon Sovereign asked. His voice was deep and resonant, filled with overwhelming authority. No one dared meet his eyes. He was the ruler of the ancient dragon god empire and had been for tens of millions of years. His imperial aura was immense. Yes, they sent me to relay the message, the soldier said. Where is White General? Paragon Dragon Sovereign asked. He was killed, the soldier stammered. How many people did the true martial sacred ground bring? Paragon Dragon Sovereign asked again. I don't know. I only saw one woman. She killed General Bai in the first exchange. You know nothing? Since White General is dead, why are you still alive? Paragon Dragon Sovereign snorted. The snort was like thunder. The soldier's body exploded instantly, scattering across the floor. No one in the hall reacted, they were used to this. Paragon Dragon Sovereign was a tyrant, though not merely a tyrant. Under his rule, the ancient dragon god empire had prospered. But his temper was unpredictable, and killing when displeased was commonplace. Thus he gained the title Tyrant Emperor. Who among you can eliminate this true martial sacred ground for me? Paragon Dragon Sovereign asked, sweeping his gaze across the court. I volunteer. I volunteer as well. As soon as Paragon Dragon Sovereign finished speaking, countless military officers stepped forward. Every one of them wore battle armor, and their auras were powerful, swirling with force in midair. Some were wreathed in draconic might, some surrounded by the shadows of tigers, and some radiated the chill of death itself. In short, every general qualified to stand in this court was formidable, at the very least a grand emperor vein cultivator, and many had stepped into the God Meridian realm. Dragon General, Tiger General, the two of you will go, Paragon Dragon Sovereign ordered. If the situation allows, bring back a living prisoner. If not, kill them. We obey, the two generals said, stepping forward, one to the left, one to the right. These were the famed Dragon and Tiger generals. Dragon aura and Tiger might surged around them, and both were built like iron towers. Dragon and Tiger tattoos covered their bodies, and as the two strode out of the great hall, the court fell silent again. Outside Dragon City, a huge crowd had already gathered. Everyone was craning their necks to watch. Because Su Zimo's group was still hidden outside the city, no one had discovered them. Only Xiao Anin stood alone atop the city wall, making her stand out sharply. Zhao Zhoutian arrived beneath the city gate with 4 Zhao family disciples. They looked up at Xiao Anin hanging in the sky. She doesn't look strong, Zhao Denyang muttered. God Meridian Realm, Zhao Zhoutian said after feeling out her cultivation. She's not even a Grand Emperor. Coming here to declare she'll destroy ancient dragon god empire? She's seeking death, Zhao Denyang scoffed. She is a bit weak. We'll see if she has companions. Alone? She's far too lacking, Zhao Zhoutian warned. Enough. Stop talking. Just watch. Who does second grandfather hope will win? Zhao Qing asked. Ancient dragon god empire, Zhao Zhoutian answered after a brief pause. High above, Xiao Anin slowly opened her eyes. She had sensed something. She raised her head toward the palace. The dragon and tiger generals had already left the palace, one turning into a massive white tiger, the other into a black dragon. They soared through the sky toward her. Before their forms even arrived, their dragon roars and tiger cries shook the heavens. Their oppressive beast might rolled across the land. Hearing those roars, the crowd immediately understood. It's our dragon and tiger generals. Both are God Meridian cultivators, far stronger than the fallen white general. That little girl is doomed. The dragon and tiger generals are beast form warriors, peerless great fiends. Together they can fight even a grand emperor. They're the top of all ancient dragon generals. Right, aside from the national preceptor, the dragon and tiger generals are the strongest in our empire. Of course, that doesn't include the hidden ancestors. People murmured in excitement as the two generals finally appeared. Dragon might surging and tiger roars shaking the sky. Hovering above the city, they glared down. Dragon and tiger of ancient dragon god empire are here, Tiger General barked. Where are the rats of true martial sacred ground? No sooner had he spoken than a thunderous blade aura tore through the sky toward them. Dragon General roared. A massive dragon tail unfurled behind him and whipped out, shattering the incoming strike. Tiger General fixed his gaze on Xiao Anin and lunged. His claws stretched into deadly talons that shredded the air like paper. He moved fast. Within a heartbeat he was in front of her. His claws clashed with the true martial sword. Bang! Sparks exploded. Both were forced back. Not bad, little girl, Tiger General sneered. Your blade is nice. Give it to me. Xiao Anin coldly snorted. You won't live long enough to take it. This blade exists to cut off your head. With that, her God Meridian aura exploded. The true martial sword unleashed chained waves of blade energy that ripped across the sky. Boom! Xiao Anin charged. Tiger General was strong, but with no weapon in hand, his claws were at a disadvantage. A single clash left one of his claws shaved down by half. His expression changed drastically. Help me! This brat is harder to handle than she looks. Dragon General no longer watched from the side. He joined the fray, and the battle erupted with full force. The two generals together indeed pressured Xiao Anin, but her true martial sword was too sharp to meet head-on. None of the three could overpower the others immediately. The crowd murmured in awe. She's incredible. Even Dragon and Tiger together can't take her down. Some refused to accept it. Don't get carried away. Ancient Dragon God Empire has far more than just 2 generals. And what does true martial sacred ground have? Meanwhile, on the true martial sacred ground side, Willow Ancestor, having absorbed the power of the Leaf of Life, looked decades younger. His eyes shone, his wrinkles had vanished, and even his God Meridian aura had grown. Confident in reaching Grand Emperor? Su Zimo asked with a smile. Willow Ancestor nodded, then shook his head. I'll try, but I should be cautious. He lifted his gaze to the sky, watching Xiao Anin fight 2 opponents at once. Should I help her? He asked. No need, Su Zimo said. They're just 2 trash god meridians. If she can't kill them, then true martial Saint Sovereign misjudged her. He glanced at Willow Ancestor. As for you, don't you want to face your old rival again? Willow Ancestor's eyes sharpened instantly, his aura shifting. National Preceptor Situ, he said, pronouncing each word with weight. In 10 recorded battles between them, he had lost all 10, utterly humiliating defeats. Because of those losses, true martial sacred ground had been forced to submit to ancient Dragon God Empire and pay yearly tribute, the equivalent of ceding territory in ancient times. It was a humiliation carved into Willow Ancestor's heart. I think the reason I could never break through to Grand Emperor is him, Willow Ancestor said quietly. Situ Zhaixing is my inner demon. My Tao heart is unwilling, so it isn't clear, and thus I cannot advance. But now, with the Leaf of Life granting me a young body anew, what harm is there in fighting him once more? Ambition burned in his eyes. His long silent fighting spirit, like his rejuvenated body, had come back to life. Hearing Willow Ancestor's words, Su Zimo smiled. Just wait. The chance will come, and soon. He looked up at the sky. Xiao Anin had gradually adapted to the pressure from the 2 of them and was now moving with more and more ease. Some people were simply born to grow in combat. The more they fight, the stronger they become. Xiao Anin was one of those people. Before this, with her true martial sword physique incomplete, she rarely fought at all. Naturally, the cultivators of the true martial sacred ground never noticed the brilliance hidden in her. But now that her sword physique was complete, her strength and experience were advancing at breakneck speed. Su Zimo shouted, "You've stalled long enough. If you want to hone battle experience, there'll be plenty of opportunities later. As I recall, the true martial sword comes with its own set of blade techniques. Let me see how much you've grasped." Hearing this, Xiao Anin nodded heavily. She raised the true martial sword before her, its edge separating her from everyone else, then stepped back to widen the distance. "Kill her!" The dragon and tiger generals roared at the same time. They held nothing back. Their bodies transformed, one into a dragon, the other into a tiger. A black dragon and a white tiger shot toward the heavens, demonic energy surging as their massive forms circled the sky. Born as demon beasts, fighting in their true bodies was what suited them most. Both beasts roared, their monstrous might shaking the air as they charged at Xiao Anin. But Xiao Anin remained calm and slowly closed her eyes. "One blade heavens fall," she whispered. The true martial sword erupted with a fierce blade intent, pitch black, boundless, seemingly able to slice through anything. The 2 massive beasts lunged, claws extended, just as Xiao Anin's eyes snapped open. In that instant, blade intent burst from her gaze. A thunderous boom followed. The beast's claws were severed on the spot, their screams overlapping. "One blade heavens fall." Xiao Anin gripped the true martial sword, spun in a sweeping arc, and cleaved downward. For that moment, the blade became the axis of the world. Every gaze was drawn to that single strike. Heaven and earth dimmed. One blade split the world, so heavy it seemed it could drag the sky itself down. A mushroom cloud exploded in the heavens. Many instinctively covered their ears. When the shockwaves finally faded and the sky cleared, the 2 beasts were already plummeting toward the earth, dead beyond any doubt. Inside the imperial palace of the ancient Dragon God Empire, the Paragon Dragon Sovereign sat at the highest seat. Before him, the sky-reflecting mirror displayed the scene at the city gates. The ministers were stunned. The dragon and tiger generals were the strongest in the nation aside from the national preceptor. How could they be defeated, killed so easily? But the Paragon Dragon's sovereign remained calm. He looked toward an elderly man seated to his left. Unlike the others, who stood on either side of the hall, this man had his own chair, one of a kind in the entire palace. No one resented it. He was the strongest in the ancient dragon god empire, the national preceptor Situ Zhaixing. The nation's current might was largely his achievement, and his personal power was enough to silence all doubt. What does the national preceptor think? The Paragon Dragon's sovereign asked. Situ Zhaixing had been sitting with eyes closed, as though dozing. At the question, he slowly opened them. The dragon and tiger generals won't die so easily. He stood up. But I'll go take a look. The true martial sacred ground clearly came prepared. And I wonder if my old friend is among them. With that, Situ Zhaixing stepped forward. His figure blurred, vanishing as he walked into the air itself. Some said he was at the peak of the God Meridian realm. Others claimed he had already stepped into the Grand Emperor realm. None of it had ever been confirmed. Seeing him depart, many in the hall finally exhaled. The national preceptor was their stabilizing pillar. If he stepped in, there was nothing he couldn't handle. Back at the city walls of Dragon City, Zhao Zhoutian was still watching the battle in the sky. The true martial sword and the true martial sword technique, he sighed. Such plain names, yet once feared across the world. Hard not to feel nostalgic. Second Grandpa, you must have met the true martial Saint Sovereign? Zhao Danyang asked. I met him. To be precise, I only had the right to grovel and look up at him, Zhao Zhoutian said, shaking his head. All old stories now. No need to revisit them. Let's just watch. Those two can't beat that girl. The national preceptor should be arriving soon. Second Grandpa, who's stronger, you or the national preceptor? Zhao Danyang asked. Everyone here in the ancient dragon god empire keeps praising him. Situ Zhaixing's strength isn't what makes him formidable, Zhao Zhoutian said. His real power lies in how he handles matters. The ancient dragon god empire used to be only upper mid among the divine nations. After he became national preceptor, he expanded the borders and built ties with the major clans. He wins people over. As for his raw strength among true cultivators, he's actually fairly average. The group nodded. From that description, he was clearly a strategist, a man skilled in both civil and martial matters but stronger in the former. Under the sky, as the dragon and tiger bodies fell, everyone assumed the two generals were dead. Yet their corpses began to fuse mid-air. Dragon roars and tiger howls echoed as demonic energy condensed into a sphere, wrapping their bodies. Moments later, a massive claw tore through the sphere, a dragon's claw. Then the creature appeared fully. 2 heads, 1 dragon and 1 tiger, its aura overwhelming, its body draconic with tiger limbs. A bizarre and terrifying sight. What is that? Someone asked. Some kind of fusion secret art, I guess. Looks powerful. As people murmured, the monster roared. At the same time, Situ Zhaixing tore through the void and stepped into the battlefield. This time, the dragon and tiger generals fully fused together, becoming a single dragon-tiger beast. It roared furiously at Xiao Anin. At that moment, its attack power, defense, and speed all multiplied several-fold. The dragon-tiger beast clashed with Xiao Anin in midair. Meanwhile, National Preceptor Situ stepped through the sky, sweeping his gaze across the heavens. Taoist Willow, he called out, come forward and speak with me. Hearing himself challenged, Willow Ancestor naturally refused to appear weak. He looked at Su Zimo. Ancestor, I'll handle him. Go, Su Zimo said with a casual wave. Only then did Willow Ancestor rise into the air. National Preceptor Situ, he called lightly. Long time no see. The powerful auras of the two men surged upward. They hadn't even exchanged blows, yet their momentum had already collided, competing before the true battle even began. The moment Willow Ancestor appeared, Situ's eyes narrowed. The last time they had fought, Willow Ancestor was already a spent arrow, old, decrepit, lifespan nearly exhausted, deathly aura clinging to him. But this time he looked full of vitality, as if reborn with boundless life force. Situ Zhaixing couldn't understand what had happened to change him so drastically in such a short time. But he understood one thing. Something major must have occurred within the true martial sacred ground. Otherwise, they wouldn't be bold enough to openly proclaim they were here to destroy the ancient dragon god empire. They weren't fools, nor were they suicidal. Situ didn't attack immediately. Instead he asked, "Taoist Willow, can you give me an explanation?" "What explanation do you want?" Willow Ancestor replied. "Isn't the scene before us explanation worthy? For no reason. Why kill the generals of my ancient dragon god empire?" Situ questioned. "Your ocean dragon prince wanted to exterminate our true martial sacred ground. Were we supposed to kneel and wait to die?" Willow Ancestor said coldly. "We are simply returning the favor." "There must be some misunderstanding," Situ said. "Misunderstanding? Then tell me this, National Preceptor. When our true martial sacred ground was destroyed, did your ancient dragon god empire have a hand in it?" Willow Ancestor asked. Situ gave a dismissive laugh. "Taoist Willow, your accusation casts a very wide net. Back then, we were only drinking the soup. If you have the guts, go after the ones who were eating the meat. Don't worry. We'll visit every last one of them," Willow Ancestor said coldly. "We'll sweep through them all. But before that, we'll use you as the appetizer." "In that case, there's nothing left to discuss," Situ replied with a snort. He waved his hand. A massive star appeared around him, swirling with power. With a thunderous boom, he hurled the star downward. It fell from the heavens, covering the sky. Willow Ancestor snorted and struck upward with both palms. Spirit energy gathered like a devouring whale, forming a colossal heavenly palm that grabbed for the star. The clash echoed through the void with roaring thunder. With a final explosive bang, Star Force shattered. The giant palm and the falling star collided and burst apart. The fragmented star split into countless smaller stars, each shooting into the sky and lodging in the heavens. Situ stepped forward through the air, his aura erupting. With a wave of his hand, the power of heaven and earth condensed at his fingertips. Willow Ancestor also struck out. In a span of mere seconds, the two exchanged dozens of blows, both being knocked back. Situ frowned. He could clearly feel it. Willow Ancestor had grown far stronger. He could now match him evenly, whereas in the past he had always been the weaker of the two. Situ raised his hand again. The stars that had embedded themselves in the sky suddenly flickered. The blue sky darkened into pitch black, turning into night. The starry sky shimmered beautifully, yet beneath that beauty hid a deadly killing force. "It's the National Preceptor's heaven-spanning star formation," someone below exclaimed. "He summoned 3,000 stars to form the formation, his famous technique. They say this formation uses the power of heaven and earth. Who knows if it can kill that old man? No need to worry. The National Preceptor has always defeated him. He's never lost. Everything will be fine." As people murmured, the sky above was fully engulfed by the starry formation. Willow Ancestor suddenly felt an oppressive force binding his entire body. His spirit power was sealed, unable to circulate. His movements were frozen. The 3,000 stars burned as if self-ignited, each carrying a lethal force. Then, with a thunderous roar, every star unleashed a torrent of power. 3,000 torrents wove together and blasted toward Willow Ancestor at the center. The flood drowned everything, destroying all in its path. The void shattered. People heard the explosion but could see nothing through the blinding shockwaves. On the true martial sacred ground side, Wang Hengji panicked. "Ancestor, please save Willow Ancestor." "What's the hurry?" Su Zimo glanced at him. "He hasn't even shown his true form yet. My opponent is not Situ Zhaixing. Such a small character isn't worth my time." Hearing this, Wang Hengji had no choice but to look back up at the sky. All eyes focused on the center of the explosion. As the blast faded, Willow Ancestor was no longer visible. Instead, a colossal willow tree stood between heaven and earth, its vast canopy propping up the sky itself. This was no ordinary willow. Its trunk alone was 10,000 meters tall. Its countless branches glowed faintly, radiating vitality. The tree brimmed with life force, and its very presence supported the heavens. The star formation could not harm it in the slightest. This was Willow Ancestor's true form. Everyone frowned slightly. This Willow Ancestor was far too strong. A willow spirit at the God Meridian realm had no business possessing such power. But this strength wasn't solely his own. The leaf of life Suzimo had given him, being of the same origin as his true body, had fused with him perfectly. The aura of the Willow Ancestor grew stronger and stronger, especially after transforming into a giant willow tree. His presence became overwhelming. In the past, because of his advanced age, the Willow Ancestor always used his spirit energy sparingly, afraid that exhausting too much of it would drain his life force and cause him to die on the spot. But now, with the existence of the Leaf of Life, the Willow Ancestor no longer needed to hold back. He could unleash his full strength without hesitation. The spirit energy within him surged like a vast river, roaring and overflowing. The willow tree body grew taller and taller, as if it could cover the entire ancient dragon god empire. Down below, Wang Hengji stared wide-eyed in shock. I've never seen the Willow Ancestor like this. I didn't expect he could be this strong. Did you think someone brought back by Sandao would be an ordinary willow tree? Suzimo smiled and shook his head. Ancient willows were divine trees of primordial times, born blessed by nature. They may not be the absolute pinnacle of heaven and earth, but they certainly rank among the higher existences. As Suzimo spoke, the battle continued fiercely above the heavens. Seeing the Willow Ancestor's overwhelming power, the National Preceptor Situ naturally refused to be outdone. He too stopped holding back, and an increasingly fearsome power erupted skyward. It was pure imperial might. Everyone knew that this National Preceptor Situ was a powerhouse of divine bloodline. Seeing this, the crowd below burst into excited commotion. Our National Preceptor Situ is breaking into the Grand Emperor realm. Doesn't that make him invincible? Don't be fooled by that ancient tree's strength. No power can bridge a gap in realm. Wait, not a true emperor. Looks like a half-emperor. Some noticed that after National Preceptor Situ's aura rose for a while, it suddenly halted. He had clearly grasped a Grand Emperor's nomological truth, but without undergoing heavenly tribulation, he had yet to fully transform. Thus, he could only be considered a half-emperor. So what if he's half-emperor? That's still more than enough to crush that rotten tree. We're citizens of the ancient dragon god empire. We naturally cheer for National Preceptor Situ. While the crowd argued, countless branches from the heavenly willow tree lashed forward, blanketed in imperial pressure and unstoppable might. National Preceptor Situ grabbed a branch with one hand, and the two began a fierce contest of strength. It was difficult to determine a winner in a short time. Although National Preceptor Situ's realm was slightly higher, the Willow Ancestor's true body branches held a slight advantage. Meanwhile, Xiaoanan had already gained the upper hand in her own battle. Even with the Tiger Dragon Beast's fusion greatly boosting its strength, it still wasn't her match. Wielding the true martial sword, she charged forward with an aura of God's block, kill gods, demons block, kill demons. Strike after strike, her mastery of the true martial sword technique became increasingly refined, forcing the Tiger Dragon Beast to flee in desperation. Elsewhere within the ancient dragon god empire, thousands of armored soldiers marched out in perfect formation. Fully equipped and brimming with killing intent, they emerged from the city gates. The crowd instinctively cleared a path. Someone spotted the troops and shouted, "It's the ancient dragon army! The ancient dragon army! The most elite force of our kingdom! They've mobilized too. What are they planning to do?" People shifted their attention from the skyborne battle to the approaching troops. "Get ready," Suzimo said. "They're here specifically for us." Wang Hengji nodded nervously, and the disciples behind him tensed as well. From the sage Heaven God Empire's side, Wheel Sun asked, Imperial Ancestor, do you require us to mediate? Our sage Heaven God Empire still shares some goodwill with the ancient Dragon God Empire. Su Zimo glanced at him. You said earlier you would support us. Fine, I'll give you a chance. Kill these ancient dragon soldiers. Honored Ancestor, I fear you misunderstand. The Wheel Sun National Preceptor said quickly. When we spoke of support, we meant that if the true martial sacred ground faced crisis, we would help negotiate. Not that we would help you destroy the ancient Dragon God Empire. He absolutely could not agree. Doing so would create enmity between the Sage Heaven God Empire and the ancient Dragon God Empire, consequences he could not bear. Su Zimo sneered. He never truly expected help. He had only offered an opportunity out of old ties, for the Sage Heaven God Empire had once been the closest subordinate power under the true martial sacred ground. But now things had clearly changed. Su Zimo looked ahead. Nearly 10 billion ancient dragon soldiers had encircled them, layer after layer, forming an impenetrable steel blockade. Their combined shout shook the heavens, their voices rising straight into the clouds, majestic and overwhelming. At the front of the troops, a general clad in black armor stepped forward and stopped before Wang Hengji. Sect Master Wang, His Majesty orders you to appear before him, the general boomed. Wang Hengji frowned. The Paragon Dragon Sovereign had seen his location through the mirror and thus sent the army to seize him. If Wang Hengji chose to come willingly, they wouldn't have to fight. If not, they would take him dead or alive. Hearing the general's command, Wang Hengji replied calmly, Sorry, I'm no longer the one in charge. All matters of the true martial sacred ground are decided by our ancestor. Ancestor? The general blinked in confusion, then spotted Su Zimo sitting in the wheelchair. He scoffed. A snot-nosed brat dares to call himself an ancestor? A crisp sound followed. Before the general could react, a thin line of blood appeared on his neck. His head separated from his body and fell at his feet. Only then did his rigid body collapse. The surrounding soldiers were stunned, but with their overwhelming numbers, they did not retreat. Someone shouted, He killed our general. Capture him. Let him accompany the general in death. The 10,000-man force surged forward like a tidal wave, shaking the earth. Su Zimo slowly lifted his head. He rested Shadow Tyrant blade across his legs, tapped lightly on the scabbard, and said with a faint smile, Letting you kill these ants would dirty your edge, but I'll trouble you just this once. With a thunderous boom, the blade left its scabbard. The metallic ring of it echoed through heaven and earth. From afar, the spectators saw a strange sight. The massive army that had been charging fiercely suddenly froze mid-stride, statues locked in place. The blade intent had torn through the void too quickly for anyone to perceive. A moment later, the frozen scene shattered. All 10 billion soldiers' bodies broke apart simultaneously, limbs flying, flesh bursting into fragments. In only a few minutes, their remains exploded across the battlefield as if dissolved into pieces. A river of blood shot into the sky. Countless corpses scattered like a mass grave erupting before everyone's eyes. Some people vomited on the spot. The scene was simply too overwhelming. Seeing so many people die from a single strike so brutally was beyond what many could handle. Even Zhao Zhoutian frowned. What a heavy killing intent. Second Grandpa, I feel like throwing up the tea I just drank, Zhao Denyang said. Looks like the true martial sacred ground really brought someone ruthless this time. Zhao Zhodan muttered in thought. Who could it be? Could it be one of the survivors from the great battle back then? He couldn't figure it out, but the sight of 10 billion soldiers dying in a few minutes was shocking enough to leave anyone speechless. Even inside the palace, the Paragon Dragon Sovereign suddenly stood up from the mirror he was watching. As for Xiao Anan, she finally finished off the Tiger Dragon beast. Wielding the true martial sword, she burst forward like a blazing rainbow. After several consecutive strikes, the beast's tiger head was severed. The dragon head let out a painful roar, but the next moment, Xiao Anan kicked it in the skull, sending the entire beast flying. Crashed into the city wall, collapsing a huge section of it. The nearby citizens fled in fear. Xiaonan landed, showing no mercy. She plunged her blade into the dragon head. The tiger dragon beast cried out a few times before collapsing into a pool of blood. High above, National Preceptor Situ, locked in combat with the Willow Ancestor, paused when he saw this. The two separated. His eyes reddened with rage. The ancient dragon army had been annihilated by Su Zimo with a single strike. Those soldiers were his cultivation, his life's work, each one hand-picked and trained. National Preceptor Situ roared, his eyes about to tear open. True martial sacred ground. From this moment on, our feud is to the death. So what? The Willow Ancestor replied. National Preceptor Situ snorted. He knew he was at a disadvantage. He didn't cling to the fight and immediately retreated toward the palace. Xiaonan and the Willow Ancestor returned through the air to Su Zimo's side. Ancestor, that National Preceptor Situ definitely went to fetch reinforcements, the Willow Ancestor said. There are still plenty of old monsters alive in the ancient dragon god empire. They're not weak. It's fine. Let's enter the city. Su Zimo waved. We'll push straight to the imperial palace, drag out their emperor, and hang his head over the city gate. Xiaonan respectfully pushed Su Zimo's wheelchair toward the gate. The surrounding civilians were not harmed. As Su Zimo's group moved through the city, many people held their breath until the group passed by. Who are these people? I've never seen them before. That one in front should be the sect master of the true martial sacred ground, Wang Hengji. I've seen him before. And the one who fought National Preceptor Situ should be their only surviving ancestor, the Willow Ancestor. But who's the young man in the wheelchair? They all seem to treat him with great respect. Never seen him. Looks young. Maybe the true martial sacred ground has gained the support of some major power. That's why they dare challenge the ancient dragon god empire. The crowd whispered among themselves. None recognized Su Zimo, but it was obvious he was the one leading. On Zhao Danyang's side, he asked, Second Grandpa, you've traveled widely. Do you know which ancestor of the true martial sacred ground that is? Zhao Zhoutian shook his head. He turned to the nearby Zhao Qing and said, Qinger, I have a task for you. You must complete it. Zhao Qing nodded quickly and left. As the group of the true martial sacred ground headed toward the palace, many citizens, though frightened, followed out of curiosity since the group wasn't harming innocents. Zhao Zhoutian and several others followed as well. Ancient Dragon City was vast beyond measure and divided into an outer city and an inner city. The gate Su Zimo entered was the outer city, where the common people lived. Inside the outer city was another walled district, that too called the outer city by the nobility, where nobles, ministers, and generals resided. It was the most prosperous area. When Su Zimo's group arrived, soldiers lined the inner city walls, tense and ready. The gate's commanding officer shouted nervously, Stop right there. This is the royal restricted zone. Entry is forbidden. Is the ancient dragon god empire so short on people that they send ants like you out? Su Zimo said with a laugh. The Willow Ancestor looked at the millions of soldiers above and instantly transformed into a giant heavenly willow tree. His branches swept across the wall. Millions of soldiers were sent flying. Another massive branch smashed into the inner city gate, shattering it. With him clearing the way, the group effortlessly advanced straight to the imperial palace. The ancient dragon god empire's palace was indeed magnificent. Gold, agate, and jade were everywhere. Dragon statues coiled around pillars, dragons clearly being the nation's totem. Within just a few hundred meters, they passed more than a dozen dragon sculptures. Finally, before the golden throne, the Paragon Dragon Sovereign sat high upon the dragon throne, waiting for them. Generals and ministers stood around him. Of course, none of them mattered. Only the Paragon Dragon Sovereign and National Preceptor Situ held any weight here. A guest from afar, is that not delightful? The Paragon Dragon Sovereign said with a light smile. But uninvited beasts and wolves, we don't welcome them. If you can still talk, then talk more. Suzimo replied with a grin. Because once you're dead, you won't get the chance. The Paragon Dragon Sovereign snorted. And who are you? I don't recall ever seeing you in the true martial sacred ground. Oh, me? I'm the Sex Ancestor, Suzimo said casually. Nonsense. The Paragon Dragon Sovereign barked. In the great battle back then, the true martial sacred ground's ancestors all died. I didn't participate in that battle, Suzimo said. But weren't you ancient dragon god empire people just servants back then? Not the main force. How would you know exactly who lived or died? The Paragon Dragon Sovereign's heart skipped a beat. This was exactly what he feared. He had asked just to confirm. The current true martial sacred ground didn't scare them, but a living ancestor from the past? Even one would be enough to destroy the ancient dragon god empire. He knew very well how powerful the sect had been back then. Enough talk, the Paragon Dragon Sovereign snapped. Let me see whether you truly have even a fraction of the glory those ancestors once possessed. With a shout, he rose from the dragon throne and stepped into the air. His body flashed like lightning as he tore open the void and launched a punch at Suzimo. The power of that single punch was terrifying beyond measure. The surrounding void twisted, and space itself shattered. Suzimo slowly raised his head. With a flick of his finger, a torrent of power burst from his fingertip. A thunderous boom rang out. The torrent engulfed everything, swallowing the Paragon Dragon Sovereign's charging figure whole. Your Majesty! The nearby ministers cried out in alarm. National Preceptor Situ was the first to react. Starlight shone in his palm, gathering into an immense, overwhelming strike. You think I'm as merciful as Willow? Suzimo glanced at him. He responded with a palm strike of his own. High in the heavens, spirit energy surged like a massive whale devouring the sea, swallowing every trace of power in the air. National Preceptor Situ had no ability to resist at all. He was slapped away instantly. He and the Paragon Dragon Sovereign were both sent flying at the same time. Their bodies smashed into the dragon pillars behind them. The pillars cracked apart with a thunderous crash. Both men spat blood as they staggered back to their feet. A bunch of ants, daring to fight me, Suzimo said calmly. Let your ancestor come out. You few aren't even enough to warm up. Hearing Suzimo's words, the Paragon Dragon Sovereign let out a heavy snort. He raised his hand, unwilling to concede defeat. A massive dragon surged from his body, tearing through the void as it advanced. Everything in its path crumbled. Dragon might rumbled across the sky. Its momentum swept through the world like a tidal wave. Suzimo raised his head to look at it. With a simple wave of his hand, he grabbed the dragon out of the air. The dragon roared in fury, thrashing wildly. But it was useless. In Suzimo's grip, it was as if its fate had been seized by the back of the neck. He crushed it instantly. As the dragon died, the Paragon Dragon Sovereign vomited a mouthful of blood. Your Majesty! People shouted anxiously. The Paragon Dragon Sovereign waved them off, signaling he was fine. He looked up at Suzimo, his expression now far more grave. What? Still unwilling to summon your ancestor? Suzimo asked. Otherwise, today all of you will be buried here. The Paragon Dragon Sovereign snorted coldly. He swept his arm outward, unleashing a tremendous aura. Centered on him, a vast and majestic force surged into the heavens. Suzimo looked down. A circular formation had appeared beneath the Paragon Dragon Sovereign's feet. Within the formation, more than a dozen divine dragons swam through its patterns. Their auras were overwhelming, their dragon might vast. This was no simple formation. It was enormous, based on the entire imperial palace. The palace itself had been embedded into the formation structure. Clearly, the ancient dragon god empire had prepared well. They had long anticipated the arrival of powerful enemies. The Paragon Dragon Sovereign said, "This formation was given to us by the Gongshu God Clan. Forget God Meridian level cultivators, even Grand Emperors can be buried within it. Today, none of you will escape." In his eyes, Suzimo's strength was at least that of a grand emperor. That was why he was so confident that the formation could trap him. The Dragon God Extinction Formation. He lifted both hands, releasing a surge of boundless power. The divine dragons within the formation rose into the sky, transforming into actual corporeal dragons of flesh and blood. "They're real dragons," the Willow ancestor said gravely after studying them. It said the ancient dragon god empire is allied with the azure green dragon race, perhaps even merged with them. Judging from this, the rumors were true. "Relax," Suzimo said, waving his hand. He wasn't worried at all. He simply let the formation activate. The ground cracked apart under its terrifying force. The entire palace trembled as if it could no longer withstand the pressure. Ancient buildings collapsed one after another. The divine dragons gathered in the heavens, forming a 9-dragon ascension pattern. Then each dragon transformed into a colossal torrent of power. These torrents roared with the profundities of different elemental Daos. Not mere Dao comprehension, Grand Emperor level Dao. No wonder the Paragon Dragon Sovereign was so confident. With the formation's might, trapping a Grand Emperor truly wasn't impossible. As the torrents descended, they merged together, forming a single world-shattering force. The wind ripped through everyone's hair like blades. Suzimo narrowed his eyes slightly, then threw a punch. The punch looked plain, nothing flashy at all. But the moment it landed, the void shattered. The single punch swallowed all torrents and shot upward like a pillar piercing the heavens. Its momentum didn't lessen. It punched through the sky, opening a massive vortex in the broken void. A black hole. When the punch dissipated, the entire sky fell into silence. This is far too strong. Is he really a Grand Emperor? Someone murmured. He doesn't look like one, another person whispered before sighing. Suzimo slowly lifted his head and looked at the stunned Paragon Dragon Sovereign. "Sigh, I told you, call your ancestor, otherwise you're all getting swept aside today." "Who is calling for this old man?" A voice suddenly echoed. Everyone was startled. The voice wasn't loud, yet it resonated inside every person's mind, making their hearts tremble uncontrollably. Has the ancient dragon god empire's ancestor arrived? Just as someone asked, an elderly figure walked through the air. An overwhelming aura swirled around him. He was only 1 meter tall, short, almost comically so. His appearance was peculiar enough to resemble a clown. Hair curled as though permed, a high nose bridge and narrow, squinted eyes. At a glance, someone immediately recognized him and shouted, "It's the Martial Peak ancestor." His distinct appearance made him instantly identifiable to many. The Martial Peak ancestor isn't actually the kingdom's own ancestor. He's the one they worship. Even so, he should still be a Grand Emperor. The question is, which level of Grand Emperor is he now? People whispered among themselves, but his appearance undeniably raised morale. The Martial Peak ancestor looked at Suzimo. Behind him, a massive phantom flickered, like a mountain lifting the heavens themselves. He said calmly, "Who dares cause trouble in my ancient dragon god empire?" Suzimo glanced at him and shook his head slightly. "Too weak." He pointed a finger. In that instant, the entire sky seemed to focus on that single fingertip. A single finger crushed everything. It came blasting out of the void. Though it was just a finger, it felt more like a pillar holding up the heavens, its soaring force tearing the world apart. Martial Peak watched this scene and let out a heavy, cold snort. Behind him, his true fate appeared. A towering Martial Peak descended from the sky. Martial Peak, first among the 4 Seas Mountains. To engrave this true fate, the Martial Peak ancestor had endured countless hardships and paid a tremendous price. In this moment, Martial Peak took form, descending like the real Martial Peak itself, suppressing everything beneath it. The origin of Martial Peak was said to come from a certain witch demon. In an ancient era, a mighty witch demon perished between heaven and earth. Even after 10,000 years, its corpse never decayed. Humans who approached it would instantly rot from the corpse miasma, while the witch-demon race revered it and even guarded the body. Over endless years, wind, rain, and time shaped the corpse into a mountain. This was the origin of Marshall Peak. Su Zimo's devastating finger collided with the falling Marshall Peak. Until that moment, the Marshall Peak ancestor had been confident. But at the instant of contact, the overwhelming force swept through everything. A roaring boom erupted. Marshall Peak shattered beneath a single finger. The finger then struck the Marshall Peak ancestor's brow. An explosion rang out as his head burst apart. The Marshall Peak ancestor was killed on the spot, his corpse plummeting from the sky. The scene left everyone utterly silent. A mighty Grand Emperor figure had been erased effortlessly, right before their eyes. Su Zimo himself grew impatient. He waved his hand, striking toward the ministers and dragon lords of the ancient dragon god empire. A colossal heavenly palm descended from above. "Young brat, restrain your arrogance," shouted several voices at once. Judging by the sound, it was more than one or two people, it was a group. Sure enough, the void tore apart. 7 figures appeared in the sky, neutralizing Su Zimo's descending palm. Each of the 7 radiated the aura of a peak Grand Emperor. One of them even faintly carried the presence of a half-step saint. They looked as if they had all cultivated the same technique, their breathing aligned, their movements synchronized. Below the palace, the gathered citizens began to murmur. "It's the 7 dragon ancestors, the founders of our ancient dragon god empire, the strongest 7 elders. Long ago, the 7 dragon ancestors arrived here and established the ancient dragon god empire. Under their leadership, the empire flourished. Later, they retreated into seclusion. After generations of effort, the nation reached its present strength. Among the 7 ancestors, 3 were members of the Azure Green Dragon race, making the relationship between the Empire and the Azure Green Dragons extremely close. Seeing the 7 dragon ancestors appear, the people felt a sense of relief. If even the 7 ancestors could not handle this threat, then the Empire would be doomed. Although the 7 ancestors had not reached the Saint Realm, when united, they had once slain a supreme giant, a feat that made their name known throughout the world and greatly bolstered the Empire's prestige. Remnants of the true martial sacred ground, the 7 ancestors said in unison, "Since we failed to exterminate you back then, today we finished the job." Even their speech was perfectly synchronized, one tone, one rhythm, more coordinated than conjoined twins. "I thought the ancient dragon god empire would have something impressive hidden away," Su Zimo said, shaking his head in disappointment. "Seems I gave you too much credit. Just a bunch of old insects crawling around. Still, I suppose this is a good chance to clear up a few matters from the past." "You seek death." The 7 ancestors were enraged by the insult. They charged forward, powerful auras erupting. Dragon might surged skyward. 7 attacks, blade, sword, fists, and more, fell upon Su Zimo all at once. Su Zimo drew Shadow Tyrant from his back. A sweeping arc of blade intent slashed forward. A deafening blast filled the air. All 7 attacks were wiped out, and the 7 figures were forced back. "No wonder you're so arrogant," the 7 ancestors said coolly after steadying themselves. "You do have some skill. With your measly level of cultivation, you think you're qualified to judge me?" Su Zimo laughed. The 7 ancestors exchanged a glance. They spread out in the shape of a dragon, one forming the claws, one the head, one the tail, and so on. Each played a precise role, ultimately merging into a colossal divine dragon. This was no ordinary dragon. It was a mighty 9-clawed heavenly thunder dragon. A dragon's strength and talent were measured by its claws. Most dragons possessed 6 claws. 7- and 8-clawed dragons were considered supreme among their race. As for a 9-clawed dragon, 9 represented the ultimate limit. Anything beyond 9 belonged to beings on the level of infinite Tao. Thus, the 9-clawed thunder dragon was an extremely powerful existence in its own right. The thunder dragon roared across the void, its thunderous might erupting wildly, as if to destroy the heavens themselves. The bolts of lightning that surged from its body carried an ancient, world-ending power. The lightning was a dull gray, like the color of a world collapsing into ruin at the end of days. Suzimo lifted his head. The thunder dragon glared at him, roaring relentlessly. Its 9 claws tore open the sky as torrents of lightning rained down toward Suzimo and the members of the true martial sacred ground. Each torrent was strong enough to severely wound a Grand Emperor cultivator. Willow Ancestor and the others turned pale. The lightning covered such a wide area that they could not dodge. As for resisting it head-on, that would require overwhelming power. They could only look to Suzimo for help. Suzimo remained calm. He gathered spirit energy into his right hand, forming a transparent barrier above everyone's heads. All lightning torrents were stopped by the barrier. He formed a seal with his right hand. One of the 10 primordial god scriptures, the Aryan swastika god seal, took shape. A swastika-shaped mark condensed in the air and shot forward with unstoppable force, tearing through the void and striking at the 9-clawed thunder dragon. The 7 ancestors recognized it instantly. Their faces changed. The Aryan swastika god seal, one of the 10 primordial god scriptures. Are you from the Baiming god clan? The only answer they received was the thunderous explosion of the divine seal tearing through the heavens. A mushroom cloud bloomed in the sky. Among the crowd, Zhao Zhoutian and Zhao Danyang went pale. Compared to the others, they were far more familiar with divine arts. Their family origin was mysterious, and they themselves possessed divine arts. How is this possible? How could the Baiming god clan be helping the true martial sacred ground? Zhao Zhoutian muttered, shaking his head over and over. You have to understand, they were involved in what happened back then. How could they possibly be this confused? Zhao Zhoutian shook his head in disbelief. He refused to accept that Suzimo might actually be connected to the Baiming god clan. But how else could the Aryan swastika god seal be explained? Everyone knew that the 10 primordial god scriptures were the most extreme and supreme techniques in the world, each one immeasurably powerful and endlessly profound. For the 10 god clans, the 10 primordial god scriptures were as vital as their own lives. Not only were outsiders forbidden from cultivating them, even among their own clans, only the most talented were qualified to learn them. So Zhao Zhoutian preferred to believe there was some misunderstanding rather than accept that the Baiming god clan had intervened. The 10 god clans were an alliance. Though they schemed and competed among themselves day to day, in major matters they were always united. Because of this unity, no outside force had ever managed to infiltrate the absolute god heaven, not even the heavenly court. This natural solidarity allowed the 10 families to maintain absolute authority and rule the world. But in recent years, ever since the destruction of the true martial sacred ground, the common external threat had vanished. The conflicts between the families grew sharper, and the alliance had now essentially fallen apart. If the Baiming god clan truly had stepped into this matter, the consequences would be unimaginable. The more Zhao Zhoutian thought about it, the colder his heart became. Fortunately, he had already sent Zhao Qing to deliver a report back to the family. For now, he decided to stay and observe. As the mushroom cloud in the sky slowly dispersed, the mangled body of the 9-clawed thunder dragon appeared. It lay weakly in the air, trembling, its eyes filled with shock as it looked at Suzimo. "Who are you?" it asked. "What is your connection to the Baiming god clan?" "You can find out after you die," Suzimo replied calmly. He did not know exactly what the Baiming god clan was, but he had a guess they were likely one of the guardian families of the 10 primordial god scriptures. Suzimo stepped onto the air. Moving so fast he landed directly on the dragon's back. He punched down toward its head. The dragon let out a pained roar, its enormous body thrashing as it tried to shake him off. Suzimo grabbed the dragon's whiskers on both sides of its head, yanking upward with brutal force, pulling its head back. Man and dragon wrestled in midair, but Suzimo was simply too strong. A few heavy punches later, he tore its whiskers out completely. The 9-clawed thunder dragon eventually exhausted all its strength and fell from the sky. "Young brat, get off of me!" The 7 dragon ancestors shouted in fury. Suzimo didn't answer. Instead, he raised Shadow Tyrant high, gathering boundless blade intent before slashing down toward the dragon's head. "Spare him," a calm voice called out. Ripples spread across the distant sky. From beyond the horizon, countless dragon phantoms emerged. Their claws tore through the void as they appeared over the palace. There were thousands of them, all from the same race, each dragon a sky-blue color, their scales shimmering like pools of green water. The azure green dragon race, the hidden force behind the ancient dragon god empire. Seeing them arrive in full force made everyone's hearts tighten. The entire azure green dragon race? It looks like they've come out with everything they have. Yeah, I've never seen so many divine dragons at once. Still, I don't know if it'll be enough. That ancestor of the true martial sacred ground is way too strong. The dragon that had stopped Su Zimo was an enormous creature. Its fierce eyes glared down as it spoke. "Human, release the 7 ancestors. Leave the ancient dragon god empire, and we will not pursue the matter." "Where the hell do you people get this ridiculous sense of superiority?" Su Zimo dug a finger into his ear. "Today, I'm not only destroying the ancient dragon god empire, I'll wipe out your entire azure green dragon race while I'm at it." "Arrogant! How dare you speak such nonsense?" The dragons were enraged. Divine dragons roared, their massive bodies darting through the air. Some breathed lightning, some summoned storms and waves tall as mountains, while others shook the heavens and earth with sheer physical might. Phenomena erupted across the sky. Su Zimo simply smiled. Ignoring their intimidating display, he lifted his blade and beheaded the 9-clawed thunder dragon beneath him. With the dragon's death, the 7 dragon ancestors split apart again, collapsing individually to the ground, severely wounded. "Blue dragon, be careful," one of the 7 ancestors warned. "This man is a saint sovereign." Their battle had made this clear. Even their combined form was crushed with ease. Despairing as it was, Su Zimo was undoubtedly a saint sovereign, and not an ordinary one. Blue dragon, the ancestor of the azure green dragons, nodded slightly. "All dragons of my race," he commanded. "With my body as the core, form the heaven-devouring Taotai formation. With absolute force, destroy this enemy." The dragons roared in unison, the sound shaking the world. Blue dragon coiled his body in the sky. Among the 9 sons of the dragon, one was the Taotai, a beast that devoured everything, leaving nothing behind. The formation Blue Dragon activated gathered the power of the entire clan, channeling it into the Taoyu's devouring force and merging it into one overwhelming strike. Imagine the power of such a force. Blue Dragon opened his massive jaws. His entire body froze in midair as energy began to gather at his mouth, forming a spiraling vortex. The other dragons dragged their huge bodies toward him. Lightning cracked, gales roared, and one by one the dragons flew into the vortex. The vortex grew stronger and stronger, the energy in Blue Dragon's maw becoming so intense that even the vortex itself looked close to collapsing. Su Zimo let out a cold snort. He aimed Shadow Tyrant at the sky, gathering the power of the ancient metal god, Rushu. The divine power of metal fused perfectly with the blade. He hurled the weapon toward the heavens. At the same moment, the gathered power in the dragon's mouth erupted, transforming into a world-shattering torrent that shot towards Su Zimo. One blade, one torrent. The 2 ultimate forces collided in the sky, exploding with blinding brilliance sharp enough to sear the eyes of countless onlookers. Shadow Tyrant tore forward with a force that could shatter all things, rising straight into the sky. The void itself was left in a fractured state. Blade intent surged across the heavens and earth, vast and overwhelming. High above, the gluttonous torrent condensed by the Azure Dragon race's patriarch, Blue Dragon, plunged downward. It was a flood-like force. Unlike Shadow Tyrant's fragmented destruction, this torrent annihilated the void completely. Its range surpassed Shadow Tyrant's, though its sharpness was slightly inferior. With a thunderous boom, the 2 enormous forces collided. The firmament shook violently. After a brief moment of stalemate, Shadow Tyrant pierced through the torrent and slashed directly toward the Azure Dragon Patriarch. Having just unleashed the torrent, the Patriarch had no chance to evade. His massive dragon head was instantly severed. Dragon roars echoed across the sky as the enormous head fell from the heavens. Countless azure dragons cried out in rage and sorrow as they swarmed through the sky. Thousands of divine dragons dove toward Su Zimo, attempting to drown him under their numbers. "If that's the case, then you can all accompany your patriarch in death," Su Zimo said with a grin. Shadow Tyrant swirled through the void and returned to his hand. With the blade in his grasp, a storm of world-shattering blade intent erupted across the heavens. 8 directions, sky split. Centered on Su Zimo, endless blade intent exploded outward with the power to split the sky itself. Even the firmament seemed ready to break apart. The dragons that approached were instantly torn into pieces by the raging blade currents. Miserable cries echoed as dragon bodies were ripped apart, flesh and blood flying in every direction. Blood rained from the sky. Witnessing this, the heavily wounded 7 dragon ancestors roared, "No!" But they were powerless. They could only watch everything unfold. "Today, the Azure Dragon race will be wiped out," someone murmured with a sigh. "Sometimes that's how it is. Provoke the wrong person, and even the most prosperous nation can vanish overnight." Everyone could see that the ancient dragon god empire was doomed. Without unexpected intervention, destruction was inevitable. The crowd whispered among themselves. Su Zimo turned to the onlookers and said, "The ancient dragon god empire will fall today. Anything inside the imperial palace is yours to take." The spectators' eyes instantly burned with greed. To common folk, the treasures within the imperial palace were irresistible. Even though the nation was being destroyed, the city itself was unharmed. Their homes remained. Only the ruler was changing, so many felt little distress. First, no one dared to move. But when a few bold individuals rushed into the palace and hauled out valuables, the crowd's frenzy ignited. Greed is always one of humanity's greatest weaknesses. Watching people rush to empty the palace, the Paragon Dragon Sovereign, gravely injured, roared, "Stop! All of that is mine. Mine!" But no one cared. A fallen phoenix is not worth as much as a chicken. Wang Hengji looked on with pained expression. "Imperial Ancestor, our true martial sacred ground is developing right now. We need resources. Letting outsiders take them is a waste." "What are you rushing for?" "Those are just ornaments," Su Zimo replied. "The ancient dragon god empire's treasury belongs to us. And from today onward, this territory will fall under the domain of the true martial sacred ground. Its vast lands will mark the sect's return." "Imperial Ancestor is wise," Wang Hengji said with a fawning grin. Su Zimo pointed toward the remaining generals and ministers of the ancient dragon god empire and instructed Willow Ancestor, "I can't be bothered to kill them all. Handle it yourselves." Willow Ancestor nodded quickly. Su Zimo entered the golden throne and sat upon the main seat. In truth, the dragon throne was stiff and uncomfortable. "From here, which of the 10 god clans is the closest?" he asked. "Imperial Ancestor, are you truly planning to attack the 10 god clans?" Wang Hengji asked in surprise. "You think I was joking?" Su Zimo shot back. "Honestly, having control of the ancient dragon god empire is already impressive," Wang Hengji muttered. He was the type to accept whatever fate brought and disliked unnecessary risks. He warned, "The 10 god clans are nothing like these divine nations. Their strength represents the peak of the entire absolute god heaven." "I know that better than you," Su Zimo waved him off. "We have our own plan. I'm not asking you to fight. Just follow along, carry messages, and stay out of the way." To destroy the 10 god clans, the current true martial sacred ground was nowhere near enough. Even Willow Ancestor was insignificant before them. Su Zimo had his own intentions, and this time he wasn't acting alone. "Among the 10 god clans, Yu God clan is the closest to the ancient dragon god empire," Wang Hengji said. "Did the Yu God clan participate in the destruction of the true martial sacred ground back then?" Su Zimo asked. "I don't know. Better let Master explain, Wang Hengji replied. He wasn't involved in that incident. He had only been accepted later to help revive the sect. Willow Ancestor spoke. 3 ancestors of the Yu God clan appeared openly. I suspect more were hidden. In truth, I believe all 10 God clans took part in the sect's annihilation. Some acted openly, some in secret. No problem, we'll just crush them one by one. Honestly, I'd prefer if they all gathered together. That way I could wipe them out in one go. Saves me the travel time, Su Zimo said with a smile. Willow Ancestor and Wang Hengji didn't dare respond. To them, Su Zimo was unbelievably arrogant. The 10 God clans were like gods in the eyes of most. After taking control of the ancient Dragon God Empire, Su Zimo announced that the true martial sacred ground could rest and regroup here. As for himself, he intended to enter seclusion. Willow Ancestor guarded his door, allowing no one to disturb him. Inside the room, Su Zimo sat cross-legged. With a wave of his hand, a small tower appeared in his palm, the true martial tribulation tower. It had shrunk hundreds of times in his grasp. He opened the tower's entrance and transformed into a streak of light, entering it. Those who had never stepped inside would never understand what lay within. Su Zimo now stood inside the tribulation tower. Directly opposite him stood another version of himself, another Su Zimo. The two stared at each other. This was the wonder of the tower. It could simulate a fully authentic version of oneself. Not an approximation, not a vague construct, an exact duplicate in every way. Su Zimo looked past the duplicate toward the pinnacle of the tower. He smiled and said, "I'm not here for you." The other Su Zimo made a gesture for him to proceed. Su Zimo walked unhindered to the top of the tower. While anyone else would need to clear each level one by one, he needed no obstacles. He was now the master of the true martial tribulation tower itself. "You've arrived." A gentle laugh sounded as he reached the summit. An elderly man greeted him. He wore a gray robe and simple hemp trousers. His long hair was completely white. When he smiled, he seemed kind and approachable. "World-weary," Su Zimo greeted him with a slight nod. "I've already destroyed the ancient Dragon God Empire." "No need to rush," the old man replied with a smile. "Give the 10 God clans a bit of time to prepare, so they won't claim they were caught off guard." "Have you been monitoring the Heavenly Court?" Su Zimo asked. "We have. Unless the Heavenly Court intends to plunge the 9 heavens into absolute chaos, we don't need to guard against anything else," the old man said. "The Heavenly Court is preparing, but they won't make it in time, and we won't give them the chance. Let the absolute God Heaven be the starting point." "What is your goal?" Su Zimo asked. "It's better that he explains it to you," the old man replied. "But I want to know now," Su Zimo insisted. "Then what is your goal?" the old man countered. "I hope we're walking the same path," Su Zimo said. "For now we are," the old man answered with a gentle smile. "All roads are paths walked by those before us, retreading the old paths, but with new travelers. I'm forging my own path," Su Zimo said. "I need intelligence on the 10 God clans." The old man chuckled and handed him a book. "This contains information on not just the 10 God clans, but also the Heavenly Court. I believe you'll find it interesting." Su Zimo took the book and looked around. Few would ever imagine that the pinnacle of the Tribulation Tower was actually a graveyard. The land was uneven, dotted with millions of graves. Above each grave stood a statue, sculpted in the likeness of the person buried beneath it. The old man, world-weary, seemed more like a caretaker of this graveyard. Every day, he polished the statues with meticulous care, focusing on nothing else. Su Zimo put away the book and walked quickly through the graves until he reached one of the statues deep inside. "Everyone worships the heroes of the past," he said quietly. "But only in chaotic eras are true heroes forged. You don't revere heroes, because you are one." After leaving the Tribulation Tower, Su Zimo prepared to advance on his path towards Sage Monarch. Truthfully, he was still far from that level. Breaking through would not be easy. But he wanted to elevate his cultivation to its peak before the coming war, entering the battle in perfect condition. His hope for advancing to Sage Monarch lay in the Tribulation Tower itself. At his level, advancement was no longer about absorbing spirit energy or breaking internal barriers. It was about understanding, comprehending the laws of heaven and earth, grasping the mysteries of the body. Some could break through several realms in a single moment of enlightenment. Others spent a lifetime in stagnation, unable to take even half a step forward. Su Zimo lifted his head slightly and let the Tribulation Tower float around him. The tower had been engraved with the Tao of countless generations of true martial ancestors. Each had left their own Tao within it. When Su Zimo became a sage monarch, he too would inscribe his Tao, passing it to future generations. This accumulation of countless Tao legacies made the tower immensely powerful. It could almost peer into the Taos of every ancestor. Su Zimo began studying them, seeking commonalities and merging them into his understanding of the sage monarch realm. He closed his eyes. A gray mist enveloped him. As his enlightenment deepened, visions unfolded within the Tao. One figure controlling heaven and earth, another moving mountains and seas, one unleashing a blade that shook the heavens, another dominating a western peak. The Taos of countless ancestors manifested before him. The gray mist around him grew thicker and stronger, finally encasing him completely, like a great cocoon in which he continued his enlightenment. At the center of the absolute God Heaven stood the Heaven's Ward Tower. It was said to be a unique and mysterious force, one that rarely involved itself in worldly affairs. Its purpose was to maintain balance in the world. Only events that threatened that balance would draw their attention. The last time the Heaven's Ward Tower appeared was because of the true martial sacred ground. Their rise had been too rapid, disrupting the balance of the absolute God Heaven. The 10 god clans felt threatened and panicked. Eventually, the true martial sacred ground was destroyed, and balance was restored. Now, the Heaven's Ward Tower had opened once more. The 10 god clans responded, each sending representatives to its gates. The Heaven's Ward Tower was solemn and majestic. All who arrived felt compelled to show respect. This generation's Tower Master was known as Supreme Ascendant. Though only a title, it reflected his status. He sat at the highest seat, wearing a golden cloak made of some unknown material, blending gold and white with a gleaming luster. The cloak was oversized, covering his entire head and face. This was the rule of the Heaven's Ward Tower. None of its members could reveal their faces. All wore such cloaks with different colors denoting different ranks. Below him sat the 10 god clans, the only ones qualified to enter the hall. Most people in the domain didn't even know where the hall was located, let alone step inside. So many years, someone sighed quietly. I didn't expect we would gather here again. After the man's quiet sigh, someone beside him spoke up as well. I'd honestly prefer if we never had reason to gather here again. His tone carried regret and helplessness. Indeed, unless a true threat to stability appeared, the 10 god clans and the Heaven's Ward Tower would never convene together. What's the issue this time? Someone asked. Have none of you heard the rumors? Supreme Ascendant asked. His golden mask flickered faintly with surging spirit energy. The mask was impossibly deep, impossible to see through. What rumors? Someone asked in confusion. Is the Heavenly Court plotting again? We shouldn't have any conflict with them, another person said. None of them wished to become enemies with the Heavenly Court. Back then, during that incident, they had even given the Heavenly Court quite a few benefits. At this point, there were very few things that could make the 10 god clans and the Heaven's Ward Tower tense. Combined, their strength ranked near the top of the entire 9 heavens. It's not the Heavenly Court, Supreme Ascendant said. Think back to the last time we gathered. The true martial sacred ground? Someone immediately recalled. Last time they had gathered to destroy the true martial sacred ground. Don't tell me they've risen from the ashes? That shouldn't be possible. We personally killed those people. There shouldn't be any loose ends. We haven't gathered much information yet, Supreme Ascendant said. But there's no doubt about one thing. The true martial sacred ground has started to move. I discovered a few traces, but someone hid themselves extremely well. In the end, I found nothing. The ancient dragon god empire was annihilated, someone added. Whether it was an accident or the true martial sacred ground returning, we should destroy them before they grow, someone said coldly. He clearly hated the sect deeply. Taoist Gong Shu, do you have any suggestions? Someone asked. What suggestions do we need? If we unite, even the true martial sacred ground at its peak couldn't stand against us, let alone whatever weak remnant exists now, Gong Shu replied. Things aren't clear yet. Going to war blindly isn't wise, someone else objected. Our intelligence network spans the entire absolute God heaven. I think we should gather information first. No matter how cunning the fox, it shows its tail eventually. Many nodded. Once the situation became clear, they could make any decision confidently. In the end, Supreme Ascendant made the final call. 7 days. I want all information regarding the true martial sacred ground within 7 days. After that, we'll discuss our plan. His decision was final. Everyone trusted the Heavens Ward Tower. After all, the last time the true martial sacred ground was destroyed, it was the Heavens Ward Tower that led the charge. One by one, they left the tower. Across the entire absolute God heaven, countless spies began searching for information. The atmosphere grew tense everywhere. Inside the ancient dragon god empire, Su Zimo had entered a strange state. Eyes closed, he was completely wrapped in a thick cocoon of gray mist. Within this cocoon, it was as if he were undergoing rebirth, shedding the old and forging the new. The Sage Monarch stage was the final stage of the Saint Sovereign realm, and after that came the challenge of opening the 11th Meridian Gate and stepping into the infinite Tao realm. Spirit energy flooded wildly around him, filling the entire void. Inside his body, just before the 11th Meridian Gate, spirit energy gathered into a vast ocean. He wasn't impacting the Meridian Gate yet, but the sheer quantity of energy continued to expand endlessly. Within that ocean, primal Daos surged like a sea. Su Zimo possessed countless primal Daos, an endless variety. Thus, his primal Tao ocean glowed with many colors, unlike those with only a single primal Tao whose sea appeared in one shade. The primal Tao ocean was the defining mark of a sage monarch. It surged and transformed into streams of energy that drifted toward Su Zimo's body. Inside the room where he was in seclusion, spirit energy could no longer be contained. It burst upward, streaming toward the sky. Before long, it formed a roaring river of light, hanging upside down across tens of billions of miles, blanketing the heavens. A towering pillar of spirit energy connected Su Zimo to the sky. Outside the room, Willow Ancestor watched in awe. Only worship and reverence remained in his eyes. So this is the old ancestor's strength, he murmured. This is far beyond an ordinary saint sovereign. This is already the peak of sage monarch. Master. Wang Hengji arrived as well, his voice filled with excitement. With the ancestor this powerful, it's a blessing for our true martial sacred ground. That's true, Willow said with a laugh. But our old ancestor, he's never been someone who sits quietly. But that's fine. Better to charge forward with him than stay cowering in the sect and let others walk all over us. Even if we die, it would be worth it. A man should wield his blade and take back the land, Wang Hengji said with a grin. If we die, so be it. It's the younger generation we'd feel sorry for. They won't be fighting. Let them at least see the world, Willow replied. As the two chatted, the celestial river in the sky began to transform. A boundless pressure descended, and everyone in the ancient dragon god empire felt weighed down. The river was massive, oceanic, endless, vast, and unfathomable. Outside the palace, Zhao Zhoutian and the others were still debating matters when they saw the sight overhead. Zhao Zhoutian finally spoke. It seems I should pay a visit to this true martial sacred ground. Second grandfather, why should someone from the 10 god clans visit them? Yes, they destroyed the ancient dragon god empire, but that place was nothing but ants. Even if they've grown stronger, are they stronger than us? Zhao Danyang asked, displeased. You're still young. You don't understand yet. My visit is also a test, Zhao Zhoutian said. A test? Danyang was confused. But second grandfather, didn't you say the true martial sacred ground had a grudge with us? Not just with us, the entire 10 god clans, Zhao Zhoutian said. But this time we're going as individuals, not representing the families. It shouldn't cause problems. All right? Zhao Danyang nodded reluctantly. He followed behind Zhao Zhoutian as they headed toward the ancient Dragon God Empire's palace. To them, the palace looked plain and unimpressive, nothing compared to the Zhao God clan's own estate. Within the cocoon of gathered spirit energy, Su Zimo's aura grew stronger and stronger. In the end, the pressure he exuded became so intense that no one could approach him. Inside his body, the primal Tao ocean he commanded underwent refinement again and again, becoming ever more powerful. Because Su Zimo had comprehended every type of primal Tao, his tempering process took far longer than that of ordinary cultivators. He remained in the room for a month. Finally, countless celestial visions appeared around the Tribulation Tower before him. These were the Tao imprints left behind by those who had come before. Su Zimo slowly opened his eyes. At the moment his eyes opened, all the illusions shattered, an end to every false image. He saw through everything with a single glance. He put away the true martial Tribulation Tower, and all the visions vanished as well. Su Zimo rose to his feet, and the massive cocoon around him burst apart. He looked up at the sea of spirit energy in the sky, then opened his mouth and devoured it all in one breath. Thunderous roars echoed as the sea of spirit energy surged downward, crushing everything in its path before returning into Su Zimo's body. It cycled through countless major and minor meridian circuits. Finally, thunderous cracking sounds rang from within his body. His strength had multiplied thousands of times compared to when he first went into seclusion. So this is a sage monarch, Su Zimo murmured. He clenched his fist, and the surrounding space twisted and shattered under the unintentional force. Su Zimo chuckled and shook his head. A sage monarch was powerful indeed, though still within his expectations. His curiosity toward the infinite Tao realm grew even stronger. Su Zimo stepped out of the room, his power withdrawn completely in an instant, making him appear like an ordinary person. As he exited, Wang Hengji, Willow Ancestor, and Xiaonan were already waiting outside. Ancestor, you've emerged, Xiaonan said with a smile. Congratulations on advancing further, Wang Hengji quickly added. Su Zimo nodded. As expected, the so-called Sage Monarch stage isn't unattainable, as long as you have enough resources to comprehend it. The foundation of the true martial sacred ground is indeed deep. Just the Tribulation Tower alone had helped him step into the Sage Monarch realm. The true martial Saint Sovereign's intentions were not wasted. Ancestor, during your seclusion, we handled the matter of the ancient Dragon God Empire, Wang Hengji reported. We've absorbed their army, and the dynasty has now changed. I plan to rename the ancient Dragon God Empire to the true martial nation. Su Zimo nodded slightly. Any problems? Rebellions? There were a few who didn't submit, but we suppressed them quickly. With the Paragon Dragon Sovereign and the others dead, the remaining remnants can't stir up any trouble, Wang Hengji said. I leave this place to you. You don't need to report everything to me. I'm not very interested in these matters, Su Zimo said. Remember this, gentleness is useless. Iron-blooded methods are the foundation of peace. Without cost and fear, the world learns nothing. It is fear that keeps them in line. Wang Hengji nodded. He was gradually becoming more decisive, no longer as hesitant as before. At that moment, a disciple hurried over. Sect Master, Senior Zhao from yesterday wishes to speak with you again. Wang Hengji frowned. Can't you see the Imperial Ancestor is here? Let him wait. But Senior Zhao has been urging repeatedly. I don't know how to refuse him, the disciple said helplessly. As much as he wanted to ignore it, the person in question belonged to the 10 god clans. Even though the true martial sacred ground now showed signs of rising again, he didn't dare offend the great clans. Their name alone carried the weight of ages. The 10 god clans were acknowledged as the rulers of the absolute god heaven and had been so since ancient times. Hearing this, Wang Hengji snorted. I haven't even gone to settle accounts with them yet. What is there to talk about? Senior Zhao said he wishes to pay respects to the imperial ancestor. The disciple added. In that case, I'll refuse him again. Hold on, Su Zimo said, stopping him. What's Senior Zhao? Ancestor, during your seclusion, the Zhao god clan, one of the 10 god clans, approached us. Wang Hengji explained quickly. They wanted to form an alliance with us. I refused. An alliance? Su Zimo laughed. So, they want to form a pact? Yes, but I don't trust the 10 god clans at all. So I rejected them, Wang Hengji said. Interesting. Bring him to me, Su Zimo said. Then he asked, by the way, what about the Wheel Sun National Preceptor from the Sage Heaven God Empire? Wang Hengji brightened with amusement. The National Preceptor and the disciples of the Sage Heaven God Empire have been extremely uneasy these past few days. They used to look down on us, but after Imperial Ancestor destroyed the ancient Dragon God Empire single-handedly, they speak to me with utmost humility. They look like they want to serve us as lackeys again. You handle them as you wish. I can't be bothered, Su Zimo said with a wave of his hand. These fickle people, I won't accept them either, Wang Hengji said firmly. Su Zimo sat upon the dragon throne. The seat was high, allowing him to look down upon the entire hall. No wonder emperors loved the feeling of being above all, controlling everything. Before long, Wang Hengji led Zhao Zhoutian and Zhao Danyang into the hall. Zhao Zhoutian's pupils shrank when he saw Su Zimo. He hurriedly bowed. Zhao Zhoutian of the Zhao God clan greets the senior of the true martial sacred ground. I've heard about your alliance proposal. There isn't much to discuss between us. What I want to know is, why approach us for an alliance? Su Zimo asked. If they wanted to test him, then he also intended to test the 10 god clans. He had skimmed through the book the old hermit gave him. It contained much about the 10 god clans, enough for him to grasp most of their situation. Zhao Zhoutian replied, truthfully, we wished to form an alliance long ago. The 10 god clans are constantly scheming against one another. We need a powerful ally. Based on the true martial sacred ground's previous combat strength, you are more than qualified to join with us. Then he asked cautiously, may I ask, how many ancestors remain in the true martial sacred ground? Are the true martial and Sandao still alive? When Zhao Zhoutian asked his question, Su Zimo didn't need to think to know he had come to probe for information. As for the so-called alliance, Su Zimo let out a cold laugh. He asked, regarding what happened back then, isn't your Zhao God clan planning to give an explanation? Sect Master Wang, during the attack that destroyed the true martial sacred ground years ago, did the Zhao God clan's ancestors participate? Su Zimo asked. Wang Hengji thought for a moment, then turned his gaze toward Willow Ancestor. He didn't know much about the events of that era. Most of what he did know came from Willow Ancestor. On the surface, the Zhao God clan indeed did not appear, Willow Ancestor replied. But in secret, several of their ancestors were definitely involved. Before the heaven-sweeping sovereign died, he called out the name Zhao Zhen. If I'm not mistaken, Zhao Zhen should be the current Saint Sovereign Jin. Hearing this, Zhao Zhoutian's expression changed. He quickly replied, we juniors do not know the details of those past events. We hope the elder can put aside old grudges and stubbornness, so we can walk toward the future together. And since when do I need you to teach me how to act? Su Zimo countered. Originally, with my temperament, I would have killed you today. You are the enemy. Why bother with courtesy? Zhao Zhoutian's face paled. He took several steps back, and Zhao Danyang beside him likewise retreated, ready to flee at any moment. Enough. If I wanted to kill you, you wouldn't escape anyway, Su Zimo said. But this time I'll let you go. Armies at war do not kill envoys, Otherwise others would say I bully the younger generation. When I visit your Zhao God clan, I'll wipe you out then. Zhao Zhoutian steadied himself before continuing. Senior, though our Zhao God clan is one of the 10 God clans, we too are dissatisfied with their rule. We wish to change the situation of the absolute God heaven, but unfortunately our strength alone is not enough. My visit this time is at the direct order of our God Lord. You must understand, now that the true martial sacred ground has resurfaced, the 10 God clans are bound to take notice. Even the Heavens Ward Tower has already mobilized because of you. The Heavens Ward Tower? Wang Hengzhi was startled. That palace was the most exalted force in the absolute God heaven, with the authority to judge all factions and maintain the domain's stability. And so what? Su Zimo asked. We can form a secret alliance. Our Zhao God clan can pass information to you from within the 10 God clans' actions and plans, Zhao Zhoutian said. This is our greatest sincerity. If necessary, we could even defect from the 10 God clans and fight alongside you. Su Zimo fell into thought. If the Zhao God clan truly meant what they said, they might have some use. He waved a hand. Discuss it with him, he told Wang Hengzhi. Wang Hengzhi nodded and led Zhao Zhoutian and the others away. Su Zimo could not be bothered dealing with them himself. At best, they could embellish success. They would never provide life-saving support. Now that he had stepped into Sage Monarch, Su Zimo's strength had already reached its peak. The infinite Dao realm was no longer something he needed to consider for now. He turned to Willow Ancestor. Make preparations. We depart tomorrow for the Yu God clan, one of the 10 God clans. Among their 10 divine arts, the Yu God clan guarded the infernal creation eternal canon. Su Zimo had used it before, but not extensively. Willow Ancestor nodded and went to give the disciples their instructions. Su Zimo, alone in the courtyard, finally allowed himself to rest after such long cultivation, gathering strength for the coming battles. At that moment, fluctuations rippled across the heavens. Sword intent and saber aura erupted. The previously calm sky was instantly torn apart. Surging waves of power exploded through the void. Saber intent swept through sword intent, shrouding the skies over the entire ancient dragon god empire. Su Zimo narrowed his eyes, then smiled. Looks like interesting people have arrived. Just as he spoke, 2 figures approached from the distance, riding through the air on a flying sword and a long saber. Thunderous rumbles echoed. We heard the true martial god empire has been founded. Zhang Yongri and Zhang Yongyue, siblings of saber and sword, have come to offer our congratulations. When the 2 landed, they announced their names. After the ancient dragon god empire was destroyed, the true martial god empire had been established. Wang Hengzhi had mentioned this before. Since the true martial sacred ground had fallen long ago, they had few remaining connections, and most assumed the founding of the new kingdom would pass quietly. Unexpectedly, someone had come specifically to congratulate them. Willow Ancestor was the first to rise into the air to greet the newcomers. No one knew what they discussed, but soon he led the pair into Su Zimo's presence. The saber-sword siblings were both grand emperors. One carried a long sword at the waist, the other a curved saber on their back. They were cultivators who walked the extreme paths, becoming one with blade and sword. Their strength was noteworthy. They wore clothing stitched from tiger hide. Their faces showed signs of hardship, but their features were bright and pleasing, leaving a favorable impression. Imperial Ancestor, Imperial Ancestor, Willow Ancestor called in excitement. What is it? Su Zimo asked. The saber-sword siblings have come to help us, Willow Ancestor said. Fearing Su Zimo might not recognize them, he quickly added, they once received kindness from our founding ancestor. They've come this time to repay that debt. Senior, the siblings said, surprised to see how young Su Zimo appeared, though they still bowed respectfully. We were wandering cultivators. When the true martial sacred ground was destroyed, we happened to be trapped inside a certain legacy ground. By the time we emerged, there was no way to help. We regretted it deeply and traveled the absolute God heaven for years. We never expected that the sect would not only be rebuilt, but that you would conquer the ancient Dragon God Empire and rename it the true Martial God Empire. No matter what happens, we intend to live and die with the true martial sacred ground. It is good that you have such determination, Su Zimo said with a nod. The legacy you obtained relates to saber and sword, correct? Observing them briefly, he saw clearly. One was like a sword, sharp and piercing. The other like a saber, domineering and overwhelming. Standing there with chests raised, they resembled a blade and sword standing upright between heaven and earth. It was a predecessor's legacy, they replied with a smile. We split it in half, one person carrying one part. Not bad. Arrange a place for them to rest, Su Zimo said. Imperial Ancestor. Willow Ancestor hesitated, as though unsure whether to speak. Say whatever you want to say, Su Zimo prompted. With the founding of the true Martial God Empire, we originally thought no one would come to congratulate us. But word is that many powerful forces intend to visit. Willow Ancestor said, I want to take a single day to prepare a banquet. At the very least, it will serve as a celebration for the founding of our true Martial God Empire, announcing it properly to everyone. Also, among those who come, there may be people like the Saber Sword siblings, potential allies for us. That's right. Zhang Bright, son of the Saber Sword siblings, agreed. On our way here, we asked around quite a bit. Many are paying close attention to everything you've accomplished. A lot of former subordinates or friendly forces of the old true martial sacred ground are planning to come offer their congratulations. And they aren't afraid of being pressured by the 10 god clans anymore? Su Zimo replied. Before this, after Willow Ancestor rebuilt the true martial sacred ground, none of those old forces dared to contact them at all, afraid of getting dragged down with them. It was pure self-preservation. Although what they did wasn't necessarily wrong, the great tide of the era had swept the sect into destruction, and no one could go against that tide. Doing so would be openly provoking the 10 god clans. But now that the true martial sacred ground was rising again, and suddenly these people wished to reconnect, Su Zimo naturally felt some displeasure. Many of those old allies or friendly factions truly had no choice, Willow Ancestor explained. The sect was too weak after being rebuilt, so the 10 god clans didn't bother paying attention. But if all those old forces had gathered around us, it would have attracted their suspicion, and the sect may have been exterminated again. Without sufficient strength, everyone was powerless. All right, you don't need to explain further. I admit some were like that, but most were simply looking out for themselves, Su Zimo said with a wave of his hand. Since that's how it is, then proceed. Set the banquet for tomorrow. I'll give one day. Let's see which snakes, ghosts, or oddities choose to show up. Thank you, Imperial Ancestor, Willow Ancestor said gratefully. To him, the establishment of the true martial sacred ground required ceremony. Back when he rebuilt it, it had been in desolate silence. No one came to congratulate them, and the sect was revived quietly and unnoticed. But now, with Su Zimo here, he hoped there would finally be some proper sense of grandeur. In the past, the sect had been illustrious. He wished at least a trace of that pride could be revived. If the true martial sacred ground could ever shine again, Willow Ancestor could die without regret. Willow Ancestor and Wang Hengji left to make preparations. First, they spread the news of the banquet. Then they began arranging decorations and supplies. Once they became busy, time slipped away. Anyone who wished to attend would surely arrive by tomorrow. Night passed silently. Su Zimo rested the entire day, and throughout the night did not cultivate, instead lying on a chair in the courtyard to relax. The next morning, when he stepped out, he found the palace bright with lanterns and decorations, the air filled with celebration. Every member of the true martial god empire wore crimson robes and smiles. Imperial Ancestor! Imperial Ancestor! The disciples greeted him warmly as soon as they saw him. Su Zimo nodded slightly. Where is Willow Ancestor? At the palace gates, greeting guests, they replied. Many people? He asked. We're not sure, but it looks lively. Imperial Ancestor should take a look, they said with a smile. Su Zimo nodded and walked through the streets of the now renamed True Martial City. It seemed even more prosperous than before. The fall of the ancient Dragon God Empire and the recent battles had not affected the common people. As long as the country remained peaceful, they did not care who ruled it. Dharma Holy Land has come to congratulate the founding of the True Martial God Empire. The Grand Heavenly River Sect congratulates the True Martial God Empire. The Falling Blossom God Sect. The Swordless Palace. As Su Zimo reached the palace gates, he heard the announcements. Over a dozen sects had already arrived. From the looks of it, the establishment of the True Martial God Empire had stirred quite the reaction across the Absolute God Heaven. Su Zimo watched with mild interest. Willow Ancestor, dressed in red robes, was full of vigor and spirit, greeting every guest with a warm smile. He welcomed people from morning until noon. By then, most guests had already arrived, according to the records, 370 forces in total, as well as thousands of wandering cultivators. Considering how hastily the True Martial God Empire had been founded, this turnout was remarkable. After the guests were ushered inside, Su Zimo noticed that Willow Ancestor's expression was not joy, but faint concern. "What is it?" he asked. "Imperial Ancestor," Lu Yi said quietly. "There are a lot of people, and that's bad." Su Zimo asked, "Weren't you the one who wanted the ceremony?" "But many of these people were never familiar with our sect. Some even had past conflicts with us. I'm afraid something may go wrong," Willow Ancestor admitted. "It's fine. I'm here," Su Zimo said casually. "We're heading to confront the 10 God clans anyway. If someone wants to cause trouble, we can kill a few of them as appetizers." Willow Ancestor nodded. At this point, all he could do was take things one step at a time and hope the banquet would remain peaceful. The banquet was held in Azure Star Chamber of the Imperial Palace, a hall specifically built for entertaining officials. The True Martial God Empire had simply reused it. Dozens of tables were arranged, each 3 meters long and 2 meters wide. Because of the limited time, they served spiritual medicinal cuisine, made from herbs taken from the ancient Dragon God Empire's treasury. Su Zimo instructed them not to expose his identity. He entered Azure Star Chamber, found a relatively inconspicuous seat, and sat down. Nearly 1,000 people filled the hall. Before Willow Ancestor arrived, they quietly discussed among themselves. The founding of the True Martial God Empire. Does this mean the True Martial Sacred Ground intends to challenge the 10 God clans like in the past? That shouldn't be possible. The sect today is nothing like it used to be. Even establishing a kingdom is already impressive. We'll know when Willow Ancestor speaks. Ask everything you want clarified. Does anyone have connections in the 10 God clans? Do they know how those clans view this? Voices murmured all around. At that moment, Willow Ancestor walked in. He smiled at everyone, took his seat at the head table, and said, "First, we sincerely thank everyone for taking the time out of your busy schedules to come congratulate the founding of the True Martial God Empire." He spoke at length, though mostly with polite and generic words. When he finished, someone immediately stood up. "Willow Ancestor, I am from the Falling Blossom God Sect," said a middle-aged man in gray robes with a light smile. When someone stood up, Willow Ancestor narrowed his eyes slightly. He smiled and said, "Brother Luo, do you have something to ask?" Long ago, the True Martial Sacred Ground served as the leader of our northern faction. But ever since the sect declined, our northern faction has been scattered, each force acting on its own. Rivalries rise in the divine nations. I wonder, now that you have returned, do you intend to act as leader once more? Brother Luo, you flatter us. In the past, we guided everyone only because all of you followed willingly. The True Martial Sacred Ground has never tried to rule anyone, Willow Ancestor said. As for whether we have plans now, we will not force anyone, and to be honest, we are quite busy. We have no such intentions for the time being. I have something I want to ask as well, said another voice. On the other side, the Southern Fist Emperor of the Southern Fist God sect rose to his feet with a smile. The True Martial Sacred Ground destroyed the ancient Dragon God Empire. Which ancestor of your sect carried this out? Could they come out and let us meet them? I cannot make decisions on matters concerning the ancestors, Willow Ancestor replied calmly. If Brother Southern Fist is curious, you will meet them when the time comes. His expression chilled. The Southern Fist God sect had kicked the true martial sacred ground when they were down. Back when the sect stood at its peak, the Southern Fist God sect's ancestor, One Fist, offended an ancestor of the true martial sacred ground and was killed with a single punch. From that moment on, the two forces carried an unresolved grudge. When the true martial sacred ground stood tall, the Southern Fist God sect could only bow their heads. After the decline, however, they even dared send people to humiliate them. So it was natural that Willow Ancestor showed no warmth toward the Southern Fist Emperor. Hearing Willow's answer, the Southern Fist Emperor was clearly unhappy. He frowned and said, Willow, this is a bit perfunctory. We flew millions of miles to come here and congratulate the founding of the true martial god empire. Are your ancestors so lofty that even meeting them is this difficult? After speaking, he looked around at the assembled crowd. Everyone, don't you agree? Only a few people voiced support. No one there was a fool. If he wanted to stick his neck out, let him. The others would simply wait and watch. Before Willow Ancestor could respond, an elderly figure stepped forward. Southern Fist, we came to congratulate the true martial sacred ground. We are guests and they are the hosts. Since when do guests make things hard for the hosts? If you are unwilling, you may leave right now. No one forced you to come. The Southern Fist Emperor snorted coldly and turned his gaze toward the old man. The man was huge, at least 3 meters tall, like a small giant. His muscles were well developed. Age had not diminished his overwhelming presence. So it was you, Primal Mountain of the Titan race, the Southern Fist Emperor said with a laugh. What, you acted like the true martial sacred ground's dog back then, and you still want to serve as their dog now? You are going too far, Southern Fist. You bully others past all reason. Primal Mountain shot back angrily. The Titans are all muscle and no brain, the Southern Fist Emperor sneered. Back then you could have kept yourselves safe when the true martial sacred ground was destroyed. Instead, you brought ruin upon yourselves and declined along with them. Whether we declined or not was our choice. But your Southern Fist God sect became dogs of the Ugod clan, and I don't see that making you stronger, Primal Mountain said with a cold smile. The Southern Fist Emperor's face darkened. Primal Mountain, do you want to challenge me? Then fight. Do you think I fear you? Primal Mountain roared. At that moment, thunder rumbled across the sky, as if some colossal thing were descending. Outside the great hall, the heavens dimmed, covered by a massive shadow. Everyone turned their attention to the phenomenon. Willow Ancestor was the first to step outside and look up. A gigantic spirit ship hung in the sky. It stretched several kilometers across, its surface shifting with surging spirit energy that blanketed the world below. Above the ship a flag fluttered, bearing a skull symbol. At the center of the skull was a single blood-red character. You. Seeing this, many faces changed. Everyone here knew that flag well. It belonged to one of the 10 great clans, the Ugod clan, famed for the infernal creation eternal canon that shook the entire absolute God heaven. Anywhere there was sound, the infernal creation eternal canon took effect. Most frightening of all, a Ugod clan ancestor once killed a grand emperor using nothing more than the sound of that emperor's own voice. In the absolute God heaven, it was common knowledge that when facing the Ugod clan, one must never produce any sound at all, not even a cough. Before trouble struck the true martial sacred ground many years ago, the Ugod clan had been involved. Now, at this critical moment when the sect had resurfaced, the Ugod clan had arrived. It was hard not to think of that past massacre. Everyone stared at the Ugod clan's airship, waiting to see what they intended. A powerful pressure descended as the ship's gate opened. A figure stepped out. At the moment he appeared, violet light burst around him, and purple stars orbited his body. He slowly lifted his head. "It is the 7-star Emperor," someone exclaimed. "He proved the imperial path through the power of the stars." one of the Yu God clan's strongest emperors. He actually came here himself. That means the Yu God clan takes this event seriously. I wonder if he came alone, or if he is only the one leading the way. People murmured among themselves. The seven-star emperor's purple robe waved in the wind. He looked down at the crowd and said, "The Yu God clan congratulates the founding of the true martial God empire." Although his words were congratulatory, he spoke from above, full of pride, as if his presence itself was a reward. "So the Yu God clan is here to congratulate them," someone whispered in surprise. "I thought they came to cause trouble." "Hold on. Let's see what happens." Willow Ancestor lifted his gaze toward the sky. The founding of the true martial God empire does not require congratulations from the Yu God clan. His words were sharp and direct, leaving no room for courtesy. The true martial sacred ground and the 10 God clans had long been locked in a death feud. There was no kindness left between them. If the Yu God clan truly came to offer congratulations, they would not have arrived with such arrogance. Hearing this, the seven-star emperor did not grow angry. He chuckled. "Willow, that temper will harm your health. What concern is that of yours?" Willow Ancestor replied coolly. "If you have nothing else to say, leave. You are not welcome here. No need to rush. I am here under the God Lord's orders to deliver a decree," the seven-star emperor said. "What decree?" Willow Ancestor frowned. "Since when does my true martial sacred ground need the Yu God clan to issue decrees about our affairs? This ancient dragon god empire was originally under the management of my Yu God clan. The land you used to establish true martial god empire is part of our governing territory. Why would you not accept our decree?" The seven-star emperor countered. "Fellow Taoist Willow, there is no need to be stubborn. Accepting the decree means receiving our Yu God clan's recognition. It would officially affirm your status." Hearing this, Willow Ancestor let out a dismissive laugh, though he still replied, "Fine, I'm curious. What exactly is this decree of yours?" "The God Lord has ordered that true martial God empire may replace the ancient dragon god empire. But the prerequisite is that everyone of true martial God empire must receive the Yu God clan's infernal nirvana seal," the seven-star emperor said. As he spoke, a faint demonic shadow flickered on his forehead. No one could tell what creature it resembled, but everyone knew this was the infernal nirvana seal. As a member of the Yu God clan, he had naturally been branded with it since childhood. "Those who bear my infernal nirvana seal shall be people of the Yu God clan," the seven-star emperor declared, spreading his arms. Willow Ancestor narrowed his eyes, anger flashing within them. "Your Yu God clan must be dreaming. To bear that mark meant that one's descendants, generation after generation, would have to obey the Yu God clan, treated no better than servants. In fact, many powers within the Yu God clan's territory had already been branded with the infernal nirvana seal, including the former Southern Fist God sect. Only by accepting the mark could one earn Yu God clan's recognition, and any conflict with them would force others to consider the power standing behind them. "That's impossible," Willow Ancestor said coldly. "And the establishment of the true martial sacred ground was by the imperial ancestors' will. What need have we of the Yu God clan's approval?" The seven-star emperor remained silent, but the Southern Fist emperor beside him gave a pretend kind smile. "Fellow Taoist Willow, think about it differently. This could be a good thing. If you join the Yu God clan, we become family. No more hostility. We can help each other." "What's wrong? You've gotten used to being someone's lapdog and want to drag me down with you?" Willow Ancestor snorted, refusing to even acknowledge the Southern Fist emperor's darkening expression. Instead, he lifted his head and looked directly at the seven-star emperor. "This is impossible. Don't waste your breath. In that case, true martial God empire has no reason to exist," the seven-star emperor said. He waved his hand. Instantly, streams of powerful seven-star essence surged like a raging storm, spreading across the void and covering 30 million miles. In a heartbeat, the sky glowed with starlight. From the spirit arc above came a heavy rumble. Over 100 million figures appeared densely across the sky. Tens of millions of troops covered the heavens above true martial god empire, packed so tightly they resembled a black storm cloud about to crush the land below. "What are those?" someone muttered. "That many? Even the Yu God clan couldn't gather so many that quickly. Didn't you notice? None of them are alive." The crowd finally realized it. Every being in the air, human or beast, many races mixed together, was already without life. "It's the Nirvana Dirge, from the infernal creation eternal canon," someone said in shock. As one of the 10 primordial god scriptures, the infernal creation eternal canon wasn't just for offense. Contained many strange powers. Its melodies differed, but all led to the same unfathomable effect. While everyone stared at the massive corpses, no, walking corpses, the 7-star emperor said calmly, "Fellow Taoist Willow, have you reconsidered? This is your last chance." Willow Ancestor glanced toward Su Zimo among the crowd. Seeing that Su Zimo looked utterly unconcerned, he finally relaxed. Truthfully, if not for the Imperial Ancestor, Willow Ancestor would never gamble with everyone's lives. "Stop dreaming," he said sharply. "Do whatever you're capable of. Fellow Taoist Willow, I, Primal Mountain, am willing to aid you," said the Primal Mountain Emperor, stepping forward. He had once received the true martial sacred ground's favor. When the sect was destroyed years ago, he had led the Titan race to resist, only for the race to suffer devastating losses, over half killed, and still fail to change anything. Thankfully, the attackers had only targeted true martial sacred ground, ignoring the lesser forces, allowing the Titan race to survive. Now, hearing his words, the 7-star emperor snorted harshly. With a flick of his hand, he gave the order. "Kill!" The 100 million strong corpse army surged downward like a tidal wave, shrieking grotesquely. The sky turned pitch black, chilling all who witnessed it. "Fellow Taoist Willow, I will help as well. And count me in." 2 more voices rang out. One belonged to the rogue cultivator Ouyang Qi, and the other to martial blade sect master Zhang Wu. Both had once received kindness from the true martial sacred ground. For them to stand up now under such overwhelming threat was no small matter. "Thank you, both of you," Willow Ancestor said sincerely. "No need for thanks. Last time, when the true martial sacred ground was destroyed, we didn't step forward. We've been ashamed ever since. This time, even if we die here, we will stand with you," Zhang Wu said. Ouyang Qi laughed. "I'm just a lone wanderer with no attachments. Nothing to hesitate about." Apart from these few, the surrounding spectators instinctively backed away, distancing themselves from the true martial sacred ground. None wanted to be dragged into this. Facing the descending corpse tide, everyone braced themselves. At that moment, someone suddenly coughed. The sound cut through the long silence. It wasn't loud, yet it rang clearly in everyone's ears. With that cough, a strange ripple seemed to spread through the world. In the next instant, all the corpse soldiers froze where they were, completely immobile. A thunderous boom followed. Every corpse exploded in midair. One could imagine how massive the destruction would be when over 100 million corpses detonated at once. The entire sky was swallowed in the blast. Even the spirit ark the Yu God clan had arrived in was obliterated. Everything vanished. People below stared in stunned silence. Each of them possessing sharp senses, they immediately traced the cough to Su Zimo. Everyone turned toward him. Su Zimo slowly rose to his feet. Su Zimo slowly stood up. He smiled and said, "Everyone, don't be nervous. Allow me to introduce myself. My name is Su Zimo. This is our Imperial Ancestor," Willow Ancestor quickly added. The crowd erupted in commotion. In recent days, the Imperial Ancestor of the true martial sacred ground had become a stir across the entire region. Everyone knew the name, though almost no one had ever seen him. His strength was unquestionable. He had destroyed the ancient dragon god empire and rebuilt the true martial sacred ground. And for that reason, countless rumors surrounded him. Now that he had appeared in person, everyone stared with surprise. They looked at Su Zimo carefully. Indeed, no one recognized him, not even those familiar with the true martial lineage. Yet moments ago, he had merely coughed, and over 100 million corpse soldiers had exploded. They didn't know how he did it, but that didn't matter. His power was undeniable. Now, every gaze in the hall was fixed on him. Su Zimo spoke lightly. I'm glad everyone came today to congratulate our true martial sacred ground. But for those with ill intentions, I have a simple principle. Friends are welcomed with wine and meat. Wolves are greeted with guns. As soon as he finished, the Southern Fist Emperor was already eager to jump out. He stepped forward and shouted, Imperial Ancestor, what you said is rather inappropriate. We traveled all this way for the sake of the true martial sacred ground. Sometimes unpleasant words are necessary for your good. As the saying goes, harsh advice benefits the listener, bitter medicine cures the illness. Don't you agree? He continued, I personally think joining the Ugod clan would be great for true martial. Since you are the Imperial Ancestor, you should have the authority. Why don't you say a few words? You're the one barking the loudest, Su Zimo said, narrowing his eyes. Do you really enjoy being a dog that much? Hearing that, the Southern Fist Emperor was instantly displeased. Boy, mind your words. You might bring calamity upon this newly established true martial sacred ground. You think you're qualified to threaten me? Su Zimo snorted. He raised a single finger and pressed down. The Southern Fist Emperor's expression changed. Spirit energy surged violently around his fists, power roaring like an ocean storm as he struck upward. Thunderous booms shook the sky. The heavens shattered. The void trembled. To the onlookers, that small fingertip seemed to transform into a vast mountain, suppressing everything. The sky dimmed, the sun itself paling beneath its pressure. The Southern Fist Emperor leapt into the air. His fists roared like enraged beasts as he struck again and again at the descending finger. It was useless. The finger suppressed all. His body sank lower as pressure mounted. His face twisted. Behind him, his true fate manifested. An enormous hand. Some found it strange. A hand as a true fate? But upon closer look, it was no ordinary hand. The power inside surged fiercely, overflowing with vast immortal essence. It was an immortal's hand. Immortal radiance poured from it without end. An immortal? Someone exclaimed. He truly gained great fortune. He actually comprehended an immortal's hand. Another voiced doubt. But what is an immortal, really? Opinions differed. Some believed only those from the heavenly court's immortal gate could be called immortals, land immortals of absolute power. Others claimed immortality required attaining the infinite Tao. No standard had ever been formally agreed upon. Yet as that boundless immortal hand appeared, none could deny the awe it stirred. But even as the hand pressed forward, Su Zimo's finger did not slow. Immortal.
Su Zimo chúc cờ đít đai phun.
Even if a god came today, I would slay him. If an immortal came, he would kneel. And you think a mere remnant hand can stop me? The immortal hand erupted with power, struggling fiercely against Su Zimo's finger. Explosions shook the entire territory. Onlookers retreated rapidly, unable to withstand the shockwaves. They gave space for the clash. But Su Zimo now stood as a sage monarch. His opponent was merely a grand emperor. To put it bluntly, even if the immortal hand's real owner were here, it wouldn't matter. Despite its brilliance and desperate resistance, the outcome had been decided from the beginning. With a thunderous detonation, the immortal hand was swallowed whole. The Southern Fist Emperor screamed in terror as his body was annihilated, erased entirely. Only his panicked expression lingered in everyone's mind. A resounding explosion shook the imperial palace. Silence followed, long, suffocating silence. No one dared speak. At last, someone's trembling voice broke the stillness. That, a grand emperor just died. Like that. He's dead, no doubt. What realm is the imperial ancestor of the true martial sacred ground? Is the sect truly about to rise again? Whispers spread. Su Zimo laughed softly. Don't freeze up. A small mouse shouldn't ruin the mood. Sit down and eat. After he spoke, He lifted his gaze toward the sky, where the seven-star emperor stood. The man was completely stiff, cold sweat soaking him from head to toe. His mind had gone blank. As a grand emperor himself, he knew he was stronger than the Southern Fist Emperor slightly. But that single finger, that instant death, it had terrified him. Run! He didn't hesitate. He tried to tear open the void to escape. But when he activated his arts, he realized the void itself had been sealed by Su Zimo. His strength wasn't even close to breaching it. Before Su Zimo, he was as weak as an ant. Fighting was impossible. Even escape was impossible. His life and death rested entirely in the other man's hands. He slowly turned around, knees buckling. He fell to the ground before Su Zimo, kneeling, ignoring the watching crowd entirely. He surrendered just like that. The seven-star emperor knew that compared to his own life, things like dignity meant nothing. As long as he stayed alive, he still had every opportunity. So he knelt, calmly, without shame, without hesitation. "Sir, I was blind and ignorant. Please spare me." Hearing his plea, Su Zimo slowly sat back down at the head seat. He spoke faintly, "Slap yourself." He drank wine as he spoke. The seven-star emperor didn't dare delay. He immediately began striking his own face. Bang, bang, bang. "You're not slapping?" Su Zimo glanced at him. The seven-star emperor struck harder. Even so, Su Zimo still looked dissatisfied. He turned to the gathered crowd. "Is there anyone who can take over and slap him for me?" At that, silence fell over the hall. "I can," the Primal Mountain Emperor said, standing first. The few who had previously stepped out to support the true martial sacred ground also stood without hesitation. Everyone understood what this meant. The seven-star emperor belonged to the Yu God clan. Striking his face was, in effect, striking the face of the Yu God clan itself. That carried a very different implication. Congratulating the true martial sacred ground might be overlooked, but truly offending the Yu God clan, this meant real consequences. Many didn't dare. Even though Su Zimo had displayed overwhelming power, the Yu God clan also possessed countless formidable cultivators. More importantly, the 10 God clans usually acted as one. To oppose one clan was to oppose all 10. Even though the clans schemed against each other behind the scenes, they maintained a united front publicly. So, upon hearing Su Zimo's command, the crowd remained silent, except for Ouyang Qi, Zhang Wu, and the few steadfast supporters of true martial. Most people were still watching from the sidelines. Unless true martial could display the same might they had in their past peak, few would commit. Su Zimo didn't push further. He smiled faintly at their silence, then raised his hand and slapped toward the void. A thunderous boom exploded. The seven-star emperor's face was forcibly smashed to the side. His body flew backwards, head malformed and bleeding profusely. He hit the ground unconscious. "Take him," Su Zimo ordered. "Hang him at the city gate for all to see, and spread the word. Tomorrow I will go to the Yu God clan. I will destroy the Yu God clan and the so-called 10 God clans." The hall erupted in shock. The true martial sacred ground not only intended to destroy the ancient Dragon God Empire, they planned to wipe out the Yu God clan and even the 10 God clans. Where did they get such confidence? Even at their peak, the true martial sacred ground had only fought the 10 clans to a draw, and in the end they were destroyed. Everyone understood. Regardless of the outcome, the absolute God Heaven was about to undergo earth-shaking changes. It was time for them to choose sides. If they chose correctly and backed the victor, the rewards would be unimaginable. Their factions could soar. A pig that stands in the right wind will fly. But Su Zimo seemed to know exactly what they were thinking. He said plainly, "There's no need for you all to consider it. We do not accept followers." The crowd froze. The true martial sacred ground intended to fight the 10 clans alone? Along with all the forces attached to them? Many could not understand. "I already gave you all a chance," Su Zimo said, "but only a few cherished it." "A chance?" the crowd murmured. Then realization hit them. It must have been when he asked who would slap the seven-star emperor, a forced opportunity to show loyalty. Su Zimo stood up, looking disinterested. He turned to the three supporters, including the Primal Mountain Emperor. Whatever your motives, sincerity or otherwise, since you chose to stand with the true martial sacred ground, I should congratulate you. He waved his hand. 3 leaves from the tree of life drifted forth, each floating before one of the 3. Live longer, otherwise you might not witness the day I rule the world. Consider this my meeting gift. The 3 men were overwhelmed, staring at the leaves radiating rich life force. Thank you for the gift, Imperial Ancestor, they said excitedly. Those around them recognized the treasure, an item that extended life. Many were greedy, but none dared act. The fates of the Southern Fist Emperor and the Seven-Star Emperor were still vivid before their eyes. I won't attend the banquet anymore, Su Zimo said, waving his hand. It's no longer interesting. He rose and instructed, Willow, host them on my behalf. As you command, Imperial Ancestor, Willow Ancestor replied. Only after Su Zimo's figure had vanished did the suffocating pressure lingering in everyone's hearts finally dissipate. Immediately, the crowd rushed to surround Willow Ancestor, speaking warmly and politely. Some even hinted they wished to join the true martial sacred ground. At this moment, in the Yu God clan, one of the 10 God clans, situated in the northwest, they ruled vast lands. In truth, nearly all the northwest region of the absolute God Heaven was under their control. The 10 God clans divided the entire domain into 10 enormous territories spanning hundreds of billions of miles. East, west, south, north, northwest, southwest, northeast, southeast, the central region, and the oceans. The Yu God clan occupied the northwest. Here stood Yu Mountain, an immortal mountain containing millions of cave mansions, built specifically to house the clan's ancestors and important figures. Cities and structures eventually grew around the mountain, expanding the clan's territory until it stretched far beyond visible limits. Now, deep beneath Yu Mountain, inside a secret chamber, the most concealed among all the mountain's caves, light suddenly flickered in the darkness. Looking closely, that light came from strange patterns etched into the ground. None could recognize them, but each time a pattern lit up, a figure appeared within it. The 100 Deaths worm, undying even in death. A voice murmured from the darkness. He must be killed. Another voice replied calmly. Why rush? He's the one so eager to send himself to death. We merely need to wait. What do the other clans say? Another asked.